All right, what's going on? Drive time on a Wednesday afternoon, about 9 minutes past I got feedback. All right, about 9 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. It's clear and sunny, just a little cold. We had our coldest night of the year last night, but about 42 degrees. The sun is shining here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson just a few blocks away from where I'm at today, producing the program. Where am I at today? Well, I'm at a surprisingly crowded beer bar for 2:10 on a Wednesday. I'm not sure why so many people are day drinking today. Well, I might know, but it's kind of hopping in here. So come on by and join us on this Wednesday afternoon. Chances are you're either looking to celebrate or drown your sorrows. Let me just say, things are never as good or bad as they seem, and we'll kind of put that aside. But come on down and have a good time with us here at Beer Bar, 161 East, 200 South. Of course, this is the spot that is owned by Ty Burrell, Nick Raimondo. My guys, Rich. Good people, and they've got all the MLS games, no blackouts. They have Apple TV. Unfortunately, that no longer includes Real Salt Lake, as they have been ousted. We are going to do a little RSL autopsy. We have not done that yet, because we've been pretty packed with our BYU Utah football coverage. And, of course, we'll continue to be packed with that today as well. But here at Beer Bar, I will incentivize you to come by and say, what's up? I have 10 passes for our ESPN 700 Ultimate Tailgate for the BYU Utah football game. So our tailgate's awesome. We have craft cocktails with our good friends at Clearwater Distilling. We have free food from Wingers. Waters, sodas, if you're not into the alcohol thing. So I've got 10 of them, and I'm going to give away 2 per person. So that essentially is the first 5 people to roll in here and say what's up. But only two per person here at Beer Bar. So come on in. If it's your thing, grab a beer. If it's not, you can grab a little Topo Chico over there. But they've got great brats and fries, sausages, burgers. I'm told they're about to release a garlic burger over the next few weeks, but that's not available today. So come on out to Beer Bar. Be here till 6 o'clock tonight at 161 East, 200 South here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. All right, a lot to do on this Wednesday. As I referenced, we will kind of put a little bow on the season that was for our local soccer club, for RSL, and talk about what could be next with the offseason. CONCACAF is a reality, so Pablo Mastroeni will hop on the show today. Always enjoy my conversations with the head coach of RSL, Pablo Mastroeni. One of our favorite BYU Goobs, Spencer Linton from BYU TV, sweet guy. We'll get with Spencer today to talk BYU Utah football. We'll continue the college football conversation with Josh Pates, one of my favorites to talk football with. Of course, his college football podcast has become wildly popular. So we'll bring in Josh Pate today. Things have gone in the wrong direction for the Utah Hockey Club. They got smoked by Winnipeg 3-0 last night. They have now lost 6 of their last 7 games. And if you expand it out, they now have lost 8 of their last 10 games, now that I'm looking at this. So we'll do a little hockey today behind the glass with Neil Smith, the former general manager of the New York Rangers and New York Islanders, and then the voice of the Utes himself. Bill Riley potentially live today down at Beer Bar. Not sure. Riles has a busy afternoon. Ran into him earlier today at the studios, the Broadway Media Studios. So as we do every day, we'll bounce around. We'll do a little bit of everything. We'll do some NBA as the Utah Jazz have the night off tonight. They're going to be in Milwaukee tomorrow, which typically is a tough task. But that game will feature 2 teams that are 1-6 right now. So really bad start for the Jazz. As we've talked about, it is by design. So we'll get to some Jazz stuff. But, of course, high speed ahead to the college football weekend. High speed ahead to the weekend in pro football as well. The NFL trade deadline came and went yesterday afternoon. And we'll get you some takeaways from that. Your Week 10, I can't believe it, your Week 10 weekend of college football will begin tomorrow night in Baltimore at M&T Bank Stadium, where the Bengals roll into town to take on the Ravens. Ironically enough, the Bengals are really good on the road, but they just don't win at home. They're 3-1 on the road. Ravens 3-1 at home. Baltimore is about a 6.5-point favorite there. So right around the corner, football will be back. So we'll get to some of that on the show today. And, of course, the latest on the Utes, the latest on the Cougars, the latest on the rivalry game. Coming up on Saturday, 8:15, is the kick time at Rice-Eccles Stadium. And don't forget, you can hear our pregame coverage beginning at 4:15, 4 hours of pregame coverage for you guys. Porter Larson, Isaac Asiata, and others will have that show for you. The spread for the game on Saturday night has moved back towards BYU. So it opened at 5, moved down to 4, and then settled for a little bit at 3.5. And as of about 3 hours ago, now it's back up to 4. So BYU still somewhat of a healthy favorite to win the game coming up on Saturday. The first edition of the CFP rankings were released, and people are upset because I guess that's what the deal is. We're going to get to some of that stuff as we now can kind of put aside the AP poll. It is irrelevant. It does not matter anymore. This is the only poll that matters. So, Pablo Mastroianni, Spencer Litton, Josh Pate, Neil Smith, Bill Riley, a powerhouse guest list for you guys on a Wednesday. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, we're live here today at Beer Bar, and just a couple of blocks away is where we find the producer of this program. His name is Porter Larson. Happy Wednesday, pal. How you doing?
Happy Wednesday back at you, Spencer. Doing well. How are you?
I'm well.
I wish I were at Beer Bar.
Well, come on down. Just push the button that says stay on air, and then just walk over here and grab a sausage and a beer.
Well, speaking of that, sorry about the echo there at the beginning. You know, when we started with the new board, there were a lot of issues that were
No, I'm not aware of any of those issues with the new board. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there were a lot of issues that were out of our control, out of my control, stuff like
gotcha.
that.
Yeah,
that one was not. I literally saw the button that would send you an echo, and for some reason, I pressed it.
So you're just trying to cause problems. You're just trying to kill the show off the top. Okay, I see.
Entirely subconscious brain malfunction there. So
apologies. Are you familiar with the term self-reflectional behavior? You're familiar with that term, self-actualization?
A little bit.
Okay, so what that says is your subconscious is actually a true reflection of yourself, and so you're trying to sabotage the show.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what that says.
I'm trying to work with it, roll with the punches, but no.
All right.
We're good.
Okay.
We're one day closer to the rivalry game. We're in the midst of some, I guess it's not so fun hoops, but a lot to get to. Whether it's good to discuss with the Jazz, or the bad. The good to discuss with BYU, the bad with the Jazz and RSL ending their season. But as you said, a lot to get to.
A lot to get to live at Beer Bar. If you guys have never been to our ESPN 700 tailgate, it's really fun. I'll roll through. Porter's going to be there doing the show. Craft cocktails from Clearwater Distilling, free food from Wingers. I've got 10 tailgate passes, and I'll give you 2 per person, except for the people that stop in all the time. Like, let's spread this around a little bit so you know who you are. If you can hear my voice, don't come down here. But everyone else come down here, just not those people. And trust me, you may not know who I'm talking about, but the people who are sweating right now, you know exactly who I'm talking to. I do not want to see you, but I want to see everybody else. Down here at Beer Bar, come on down, right downtown Salt Lake City, 161 East, 200 South. All right, my guy Pablo, right out of the gates to do a little RSL, but before we get to Pablo on a Wednesday, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too, at Standard Restaurant Supply, your one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs, standardrestaurantsupply.com, or check them out at their convenient Salt Lake City location on a Wednesday. Time now for your opening tip. So as we warned you last night prior to signing off, there were going to be results revealed last night that were going to really shake the ground underneath a lot of people, one way or the other, regardless of which side you're on. We were going to get a result last night that was going to make people uncomfortable. I encourage you to sit back, relax, and accept the results, regardless of what side you're on. And if you're on the BYU side, see, I did it again. If you're on the BYU side, the first iteration of the CFP rankings probably didn't land very well. But let's get into a little bit. Of course, a big game coming up on Saturday with BYU and Utah. So what I tried to explain yesterday, and our guy Scott Mitchell hopped on, and I don't think he was fully grasping what I was saying. These are not the seeds for the 12-team CFP bracket. These are the rankings as the committee sees them right now. I don't fully agree with BYU at 9, but there's nothing about where BYU is that takes away what they eventually, in my opinion, will be in the CFP bracket. So they come in at number 9, okay? But they're still high speed ahead to a 4 seed and a first-round bye in the CFP. But so the one thing that I think is being a little bit under-talked about, because everybody's talking about, well, Indiana shouldn't be ahead of them. All right, well, that's probably not necessarily wrong. BYU has 2 top 20 wins. Their strength of schedule is number 4. Indiana, this will play itself out. Indiana still has a couple of tough games, including Ohio State. So BYU probably should have been ranked ahead of Indiana. And then you get into, what about Penn State, who does not have the 2 top 20 wins that BYU has. I'm not really here for the conversation about should they be ranked ahead of Tennessee. That Bama win, the committee was looking at that with tremendous favor. I'm not really here for the Texas thing either. But I do think if you're a BYU fan today, you feel a little bit hard done. Well, you feel a little bit hard done every day because that's literally ingrained in your reality with this woe is me, everybody disrespects us dynamic of that fan base. It gets a little bit exhausting. But you do have a beef, in my opinion, when it comes to Indiana and potentially Penn State. And that's kind of where I would stop. But it doesn't matter, ultimately, whether you're 7 through 9. I said on the show yesterday, I was anticipating BYU coming in between 7 and 9. I thought 9 was their floor. I thought 7 was their ceiling. And it turned out 9 was the floor. But the under-talked about thing here is Boise State's only 3 spots behind Brigham Young. And the rules of the CFP is the 5 conference champs get the top 5 seed, and the 4 top seeds get byes, okay? Somehow, some way, if Boise State's able to leapfrog in the CFP rankings, not the bracket seedings, okay? Somehow, some way, if Boise State's able to climb up past the Big 12 champ, maybe BYU falls to 5, and Boise State moves into 4. But in that case, still in the CFP, I believe you get a host a first-round playoff game at LaVell Edwards Stadium, so you don't get the bye, but you do host a game. So, yes, I think you would prefer the bye because if you get the bye, you only have to win 3 games instead of 4. But I don't foresee the scenario in play that Boise State can do enough to jump past either BYU or Iowa State. I mean, from strictly from a BYU standpoint, today is no different than yesterday because everything is still in front of you. And I suppose the one caveat that we could throw there is if the committee ranks BYU at 9 as an undefeated Big 12 conference leader, is that an indictment on the conference? And it feels like it kind of is. And honestly, can you blame him? I mean, really, can you? Like, we talked about this yesterday. We were going to do our Big 12 power rankings, and I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Like, BYU is at 1, and then everybody else is tied 2 to 16. It's impossible to ascertain who's good and who's bad. There's a chance it's just a bunch of decent teams with no great teams and no horrible teams, which is no way to build a conference, as we've seen with the love that the SEC and the Big Ten is getting and will continue to get, but that shouldn't surprise anybody. That's part of the deal. So I saw some of the reaction. I heard some of the reaction after the bracket was released, and, again, the rankings are different than the seedings, if I can continue to underscore that, because this inferiority complex where every time you don't get the benefit of the doubt, you just cry into the ethos is exhausting. Do you have a bit of a beef at 9? Yeah, you probably do. Certainly Indiana, Penn State. We can talk about resumes, strength of schedule, top 20 wins. Eye test, too. Like, you can save me with the eye test stuff. BYU passes the eye test. But the bracket, as of now, has Oregon at 1, very deserving Oregon team at 1. By the way, the only other team with 2 top 20 wins. There are 2 teams in the country with 2 top 20 wins. It's Oregon and it's BYU. So Oregon at 1, and then it's Georgia at 2. Miami comes in at 3, and I think Miami's a little bit of a soft, unbeaten team, but they're unbeaten nonetheless. And here's the other thing. You can't do the whole well, Miami had close games against BYU needed a miracle to beat the worst team in the Big 12. So y'all can just chill with that stuff a little bit. You can't throw criteria at teams that are in front of you that we can just throw right back at you about your team. You needed a miracle to beat the worst team in the Big 12, and quite frankly, you had to sweat it out against Baylor. Okay, so you played close games against bad teams and barely escaped as well. So if that's going to be part of the criteria that you use to smash other people, be careful about looking in the mirror at this point. So when it comes to the perceived, spot of where people are at, these are assumptions as far as conference champs, but there's so much left to do. So Miami at 3, BYU at 4. So those are your 4 teams in the CFP with first-round byes. And then we'll just kind of go down the bracket. Oregon would take on the winner of Indiana and Tennessee. Georgia would take on the winner of Notre Dame and Penn State. Miami would take on the winner of, how about this first-round game, Alabama and Texas. And Brigham Young would take on the winner of Boise State and Ohio State. By the way, first team out, SMU. BYU beat SMU on the road. That win continues to look better and better and better. But as we talked about last night, it was going to be a nervy evening. People were going to be on edge. You were going to hear results. They were going to come spilling in. And just accept the results regardless of what side you're on. And sure enough, it was an anxious evening as BYU comes in as the 9th-ranked team in the first edition of the expanded 12-team CFP rankings, but it doesn't affect their seeding. They still have an excellent chance to get a first-round bye as the 4th seed in the CFP bracket. All right, we'll catch a break. We're going to do a lot of college football. Spencer Litton's going to hop on, so we'll talk more BYU and the CFP. We'll, of course, get to the BYU-Utah game. Josh Pate will be great with this stuff today as he's our guest later on. Some hockey with Neil Smith and the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. By the way, Kyle Whittingham on Friday. So we had Kalani Monday. Now we get Coach Witt on Friday to bookend our rivalry week coverage. Nailed it. All right, Pablo stops by. Coming up next on a Wednesday, live at Beer Bar on ESPN 700. Utah Jazz just sent out a press release that Taylor Hendricks has undergone successful surgery to address his right fibular fracture and dislocated ankle. I've never seen a press release that says the surgery was unsuccessful, which is good. You don't want unsuccessful surgeries, but like everyone has the successful surgery. We're going to wish Taylor a lot of luck moving forward. All right, we have not done a lot of RSL this week, but it's time now to kind of look back on the season that was and look ahead to what may be with the head coach of RSL. Great to have Pablo Mastroeni on a Wednesday. Pobs, happy Wednesday, man. How we doing?
Happy Wednesday, Spence. Doing well, bud. Thanks.
Appreciate the time. I wish it was under different circumstances, but of course, the bottom line is there's only one team that finishes the season with a wind in their sails for the offseason as a result of winning their last game. So my first question is, in all your years in MLS playing and coaching, how many times have you been a part of the team that actually wins the final game of the year?
That's a great question. Not just once. That was 2010, so eons ago. But I think you said it right, though. I mean, there's only one team, and then the great thing is we drew this last game.
Right, yeah.
And that's a whole different story, those PKs, man.
Yeah, and we'll get there in a moment, but I bring up that point to underscore just how hard it is to win trophies, and of course, I think a lot of people thought you were going to be in the group that potentially could have ended the year lifting a trophy and heading on into the offseason without winning your sales, but ultimately, before we get to the situation in a vacuum, why from your vantage point, Pablo, did the play take a dip after such a great start and never fully got back to when you were playing as one of the best teams in MLS?
Yeah, my reflection, just thinking about the different things, and there's all kinds of variables that go into it, obviously, and it's going to be much greater than what I'm about to speak about. But it's probably the one that sticks out the most is, between Andres and Chicho, we had close to 50 goal contributions come the beginning of July. And then from that point after, I think Chicho ended up with one assist. And so you go from 50 when we're flying, and then Andres obviously gets sold, and Chicho, runs into a very difficult time. And so what that means from just a team perspective is when we were at our best, Chicho was flying and scoring ungodly amounts of goals along with Andres. And so at the end, I think defensively we became a really good team the last 6 or 7 games, giving up a couple goals. But we just didn't have the firepower in front of goal to really contend for a title.
So I want to readdress something that we talked about right after Andres' sale. And I asked you, I asked Jason, I asked Kurt, I asked every RSL guest I had, is there a danger that you sacrificed the potential for something special in the name of a long-term game by sending Andres on? And look, I know the deal, okay? I don't like the deal. I never will, but I understand that price tag was too I'm sure ownership would not have let you pass it up. I don't know that, but that's my guess. And so I know the ethos of the club. I just don't like that approach because of the type of sporting culture I was raised in. But let's readdress it. As we look back, did you guys potentially decide to take a paycheck and look at a long-term game as opposed to sticking with the plan and maybe winning something special this year?
I think to put it bluntly, I think that may have been the case, and I think this is where it's really interesting, in particular with MLS, is where the depths of other teams around the world are such that you can move on from players because you have 2 or 3 of the same caliber player in the state.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
In MLS, you just don't get that because of the cap, because of the way all the little intricacies of the way it's run. You just don't get that luxury. And so for teams in the MLS to do something like that, I think it's going to have graver consequences. And then, again, we bring in a player like Dominic, who I think is going to be a top player. I think he's in a better starting position than Andres was when he first got here. So that's odd. The problem is you got 7 games to go, and he's got to get up to speed, and he's leaving the country for the first time. So it's a knockdown effect. But in this particular case, It's not only the sell of Andres, but it's also what it did, what the knockoff was to Chicho, because those guys were a pair. And those are things that I think, we've had a couple conversations, with Kurt and Jason, and we'll continue to have that with ownership, Kurt and Jason, and continue to, find the best practices. But I think you rightly pointed out, it was one of those deals that it was too good for everyone to pass up on, and it was Andres' dream to get to Europe. And so there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's not just someone saying, hey, we got to sell it, but if the player doesn't want to go, you can't sell it. When the player is dying to leave to live out his childhood dream, it's almost like your kind of hands are tied, given that the deal was so good.
Yeah, and I certainly understand all that. Like I said, it's just sometimes tough to stomach from the perspective of believing you guys had something so special. I mean, for me, Pablo, at one point, and I talked about this on air, I talked about it with you, there's a real case to be made that for about, 15 to 18 games, it may have been the best soccer played in the history of the club. Right? Does that resonate with you? I mean, I know you weren't here back in the day, but from my vantage point, I think the vantage point of a lot of people who have watched and cared about this club for a while, there may have been a 15, 18 game sample size that was some of the best soccer we've ever seen. I mean that.
No, and I think so. And I guess the way that I can interpret that is how much coaching we had to do versus, preseason, we're coaching quite a bit. There's a lot of new faces and a lot of new people, coaches included. And we were coaching our tails off. The players were working their tails off. And then we got to a point where it was almost like, you get on the flight and they kick it into autopilot. And, the captains are up there talking. Meanwhile, this plane is going exactly the direction it's going to go. It's going to be smooth, and it's going to be. And that's kind of what it felt from the coaching perspective, where it's like, there wasn't a whole lot to do. This thing was just moving. The players were just coming in every day and working and just loving the work. And everything was just on autopilot, and the guys were just vibing off one another, and the results were coming, and the football was great on both sides of the ball. And I completely agree with what you're saying. Like from my standpoint as a coach, I've never been a part of such synergy, of such flow, and. Unfortunately, like all good things in life, must come to an end at some point, and then the ability to then quickly get back on your feet and now double down on the coaching, double down on the work, double down on all these things, when they were so effortless when we were going through that run.
So let me hone in on Chicho now, and I'm just stunned that I have the stats pulled up and it still says 17. I mean, I thought he was going to get to like 30. I don't know, man. Like, I can remember when I got the text about the suspension, and I just wondered in my mind in that moment, and then aloud while talking about the club, like, what effect will this have? Now, it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback this and say it must have been the suspension, it must have been Andres taken off. It probably was a lot of things, but it is pretty stunning that our guy didn't score after mid-July. As the coach, what do you attribute that most to?
Yeah, I think your assessment is pretty accurate. We've gone down all kinds of paths to try to figure it out with obviously Chicho involved as well. And I had countless conversations about his state of mind, and I guarantee you that Chicho can't put a finger on it, right? Because if he could have, it would have changed, and it would have changed a lot of things. And there's something to be said about the alter ego that you have to have with that kind of player, and the burden, the type of responsibility that comes with being that kind of player. In his case, scoring whatever the 17 goals and having 13 assists or something to July in such a short span of time, and then a couple big instances happens in your life where I think you start to think like the rest of us humans. Right? And you're no longer the Superman with a cape because of this situation and that situation. And it could have been just the feelings that those situations evoked. And so, I've never seen somebody that's been flying on all cylinders then suddenly become very human and dealing with some of the stuff that we deal with on just a different level. And so those are questions that, obviously we're going to have our exit meetings with the players starting tomorrow. Obviously that's going to be a question. And more importantly is, I think
it's up to the individual to really start the process, and then it's for the rest of us to help wherever we can. If we try to solve someone else's problems that are internal, it doesn't make sense. Then we're just ribbing him, or we're poking and prodding. But I think it's been a very difficult 3 months in helping Chicho kind of figure that part out. And unfortunately, we just ran out of time towards the end.
All right, I'm about to lay a little Shakespeare on you, Pobbs. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, so Hamlet, quote, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Right? And so ultimately, the reason I started the interview with asking somebody like you who has been an MLS lifer, how many times did you have the opportunity to walk away from a season as part of the one team that lifted the trophy? And I'm actually stunned that it was one. I thought that it was more, is to underscore how hard this thing is to actually walk away with a trophy and what a marathon season it is. Now, I am a results guy because I know the business of sports and I know what results means for the rising tide that allows all boats to kind of go in the same direction. I botched that quote. That's not Shakespearean, but it's a long way of me asking. It's a long way of me asking you. Do you consider this year success or failure?
Again, I think you have to. I wish it was as. No, I'm thinking this Shakespearean stuff. Again, I can't even find words. If this whole thing was linear, then obviously with one goal in mind, which is to win a title, then I wouldn't say it's a failure. I just said it wasn't successful.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I wouldn't say it's a failure, and the reason why I'd say it wouldn't be a failure is because it's multi-dimensional. In other words, this is, like you said, it's a business, right? So in order to keep bringing in players, you have to sell players, right? And so when you lose a player like Andres, while it's a hit to the team, it's a plus to the fact that we as a club can develop young talent. And what that means for the future means, the reason why we got Dominic, he's a very talented player, and just recently got called up to the men's Polish national team.
Nice.
And that's a huge step for him. And the only reason he came, and speaking to him and his agent, was because of what we were able to do with Andres. And one, that we were willing to play young players. Two, we're able to help them achieve their dreams, right? And so that part's a huge success, while it compromises the goal of winning the cup, right? And so then the other part of it for me, which is really important, is the game model piece, is the styles that we play, with the way we play, which for me is a really exciting, it's the way I see soccer, which is it's up and back, it's very fast paced, it's getting after the ball defensively, it's trying to score a ton of goals offensively, and then you look at those metrics from our style of play, and we've almost 100% improvement in a lot of those statistics that are relevant to our game model. Our goals, our pressing from the front. All these things have gone up exponentially over this course this year. And so when you think about long term, and what puts you in the position to win those titles is to consistently be a top team. It doesn't guarantee you anything. But when I look at this year, I think that's a success we've established. This is who we are. This is the standard we have to uphold. And it allows us to keep building a team and building belief, because if you're consistently top 4 in the West, there's going to be a breakthrough moment. You never know when it's going to be. But if you're not on top 4, then it becomes very difficult to win trophies. And then if you can keep bringing in younger players and developing younger players, whilst they're here, they're helping us win. That's a positive. And then the business side is making money for the ownership and showing them that we're capable. And it was a proof of concept with Andres and Fidel, and now we have Dominic, and I'm sure there'll be a couple other younger players that will come in. And so I think it's not fair to answer that question on one level and say if you didn't win a trophy, it's failure. It's more like there's a lot of successes that have been uncovered this year, that we've been able to achieve this year, that hopefully in the future will lead to that title when it all comes together.
Yeah, and I figured, you wouldn't utilize that to give me a binary decision, because there are nuanced parts of the whole thing that deserve to be unpacked. So I appreciate that perspective. And let me add to it, setting a single season record for points and goals, that's not nothing, man. It really isn't. Now, there's nothing hanging in the trophy room for it.
Right.
But, the hope is at some point you can take a step back and reflect on the entire situation, because the ending, I don't know what it is about soccer, man. And maybe it's because I have PTSD, because the ending used to mean, like, are we going to lose the team? And there's so many ramifications back in the early days when we lost, and that's why the 2009 Cup team is remembered with so much fondness, because it literally allowed us to basically plant our feet in the cement and say we're here, and that's what results can do. But have you been able to get to the point where you can reflect on the things that you did this year that really we've never seen before? Because I think that's important.
No, I think obviously it's only been a few days since our last game.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard. You're frustrated. You're looking for answers. But I think when the dust settles, and I think it goes back to the point I made earlier, Spence, which is you have to consistently be a top team to put yourself in the best positions to win titles.
Right.
And what those 59 points do is it validates that we are a top team. Right. And what that also does is it instills belief not only in the players that are here, but in the players that are coming, and the expectations that they must have for joining this team. And before, when I first got here, I remember it was really difficult to get good young players, or good players, period, to come to Salt Lake, because again, if they have a choice of LA and LAFC and Miami and New York, the players from abroad, those are the only places they know. They have never heard of Salt Lake. But I think the more we continue to make these steps in the right direction, the more of a favorable destination, RSL will be in the grand scheme of things. And so there's a ton of other successes behind the curtains that I'm really, really proud of. And some of those are with the coaching staff, and some of those with the way we were able to get everyone on board and start the campaign off with so many changes in a great way. And so there's a lot to take away from it. But I think if you're a winner, that shouldn't satisfy you. That should evoke a feeling of belief. But we got to do better, and we will do better. And I think that's what this season has really left me with.
All right, before we get to the off season, since I have not been able to speak to you, we'll take our medicine with one more question, and that is, now that you've been able to reflect and think about what happened up in Minnesota, just kind of give us some thoughts about how the decisions played out. Julio comes in place of Chicho. You get Vera back, and unfortunately he had a goal that was called back. It looked like that was going to be a game-changing moment. Javane goes back over to his right back position, and Emeka, who was and is awesome, goes back to where you like him in the midfield. So take us through those decisions, and then ultimately, what do you attribute the inability to find enough solutions to the most?
Yeah, so again, I'll start with Chicho, and I think that decision had been coming for a while. And again, I think the biggest opponent that we face in sport is time, and trying to find different players around him to find the back of the net, resting him a couple games and seeing what happens. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, given the circumstances, we'd only won one game when Chicho started after the suspension. So these are things that, like, you start to dig into the weeds and figure out, who are the guys that when they start the game, we have a better chance of winning, right? Given that all the other things that we've tried, it just wasn't clicking. And so that was really the case. The other part of that Chicho decision was wanted in the first half to really stretch the back line. Too often in the last two games that we played them previous, we played underneath them, and they just did such a good job defensively where they're releasing center backs into the midfield, no threat of anything behind them. So Julio, we thought was a really good option, and I think in a lot of ways we achieved what we wanted, which was to really have them question whether we were going to play in front of them or behind them. And I think that little doubt really opened up the second half. Javane playing on the right side, I actually, thought he did a good job, but I also think that he felt more comfortable leaning right back to center back, given the way he played the last 3 games in that position. And then Vera was always going to be a tough one. Vera, before the suspension, was in playing form, was ready. And I think in the first half of this last game, it just took him a little bit to catch up to speed. And there's no way to mimic game fitness and game sharpness other than playing the games. And then Emeka, for me, it's ironic that I wanted him in the middle, and then we made the shift, pull Vera out and go with one pivot. We put Emeka on the right and wanted to use him more as like a third midfielder when the ball was on the weak side, creeping up centrally, and that's where we found our goal from Emeka. So he's one of these players, you put him in any position and he's going to thrive. And so I think from just a tactical perspective is we wanted to make sure, like I said, we threatened behind, but then when we conceded the goal, we went with one pivot instead of two and pushed one of the pivots higher up in between their lines to ask them questions. And I thought we got a stronghold of the midfield, created some really good opportunities. And then the game of football comes down to, Diogo had a really good chance to go up, I think it was 2-1, and we missed that opportunity. You get 2 goals called back from offside. And so it was almost like it was beyond our control. Like whatever we threw at it, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. But it wasn't from a lack of effort. It wasn't from a lack of looking at all different options to change things around. But unfortunately, on the day, we fell short.
All right, before I set you loose, a little off-season conversation, and I'm aware that a lot of these decisions will be made by Kurt and Jason, but I know they value you and they bring you into the circle, and you guys are very collaborative with this stuff. So CONCACAF may change the calendar a little bit. The draw is going to be in December, and then you guys will get going, I believe, mid-February. Does that change the timeline of potentially adding to the group, and what positions or pieces do you think you guys need to just take that next step up in the process next year?
That's a good question, and I think Kurt will be better served answering those questions. Although we've had conversations internally. I'll just say we want to solidify our back line a little bit more, even though we had some good injection of play from Javane. Is fortifying the back line, and then up front is another position, and it just experiencing what happened when your striker isn't hitting the back of the net, and even though Anderson did a great job, I just feel like that's an area that we can reinforce. And I think the most important thing for this offseason, heading into next year's campaign, is a deliberate, being deliberate with the expectations for the players coming in next year, where we're going to have less time to prepare. And so usually we hand these guys off-season workout plans, and it's almost like, without saying, it's like understood that it's kind of optional, that if I know my body, I know what I have to do coming. But we're going old school, and there's going to be a Cooper test to come back, and so that we know the guys that we can just hit the ground running and start preparing tactically, technically, and physically for what is a shorter preseason. And so there's going to be a big ask in this offseason to make sure that the guys come in and we're ready to, and we're really serious and deliberate about, this opportunity to be a great team within our, our CONCACAF, which would be a great start to the season. So, the off-season started a couple days ago, but the off-season work, starts Monday, and get back on it and ensure that we're prepared to go for 2025.
Yeah, but you need time off, man. I believe at one point during our conversations this year, you said you've taken like one vacation in 3 years. That's unhealthy, dude. So are you going to do anything to kind of unwind before you get back at it?
My wife is looking at all kinds of trips, and
all right.
Telling her, for me, it's like, you need time off, but when you don't feel like it's work, when you feel like it's your purpose, you wake up every day and you're like, man, let's go. And that's what I said to the guys after the season is like, I'm so blessed to be able to wake up every day and go, I can't wait to get to work with these guys, man. I can't wait to be a part of this team. I can't wait to feel full, feel alive, and do great things with life. I think there's always time for vacation, and I'm sure I'm not going to have a say, if my wife, books a trip to Montego Bay, which I'll gladly take part in.
But my mind will always be on how do we become a better team in 2025 than we were this year.
All right, man. Well, like I said, a lot of good, and it's just so tough when there's only one team that enters the offseason having accomplished that ultimate goal. So I appreciate your time today and all year. You're the guy for this. I got your back. Reach out if I can do anything for you, okay?
Thanks, man. Always a pleasure, man. Appreciate your help.
All right. Pablo Mastroianni, head coach of RSL. RSL has hit the offseason, but it will be shorter than usual as a result of their qualification for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We'll learn the date and details about the game in mid-December, and then I believe it's played mid-February, if I remember correctly. All right, we're live at Beer Bar. There's actually a lot of people here. I would imagine today you're either celebrating or drowning your sorrows, so whichever one you're doing, you can come down here and do it with us at Beer Bar. I've got 10 passes for our ultimate tailgate coming up prior to the Utah-BYU football game. 2 per person, so come on down and grab one. I'd love to shake your hand and say hello. Before we catch a break, I want to tell you about Advanced Windows. My buddies Nate Orchard, Jake Weber. It's the #1 rated company in Utah. Locally owned and operated, which means sales and installation are in-house, so there's no middleman markups. You save thousands of dollars. They build, install, and guarantee windows for life. Your lifetime warranty is serviced by a local team with labor, glass, and parts all included. Save energy with custom rebates from Dominion Energy, financing available. With the fall special this week, you save $2,500 when you purchase 10 windows or more. $2,500 savings when you purchase 10 windows or more. Beat the rush and order today from the factory to your front door in 8 weeks or less. Give them a call at 801-850-9100 and visit them at advancedwindows.com. That's Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Spencer Linton stops by, our buddy from BYU TV, coming up next. Then we'll move over to Josh Pate. We still have Neil Smith and the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, on a busy Wednesday show. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. My task to Porter today was play cheesy, happy music. Just play whatever's cheesy and happy. Is this a Jack Johnson track? Are we just playing? Because, look, Jack Johnson is like an Uncrustable, right? It never changes. It's never better or worse than it was, but it's always pretty solid, yeah?
Yeah, that's I thought it was a good request from you. Some happy tunes. I don't know that it's even like a happy song. I actually think it's like a sad breakup song, but because it's Jack Johnson singing and playing to a guitar, he like makes it feel good.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with an Uncrustable. There's nothing wrong with a PBJ. Our next guest is kind of like a PB&J. He's always reliable. You always know what you're going to get, and you're never let down. Our friend from BYU TV is Spencer Litton on a Wednesday. Spencer, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Indeed, the happiest, Spence, especially if you're comparing me to the greatest snack known to mankind in the Uncrustable sandwich.
Well said. Grape or strawberry, most importantly.
I like both, but
okay.
I got to pick one. Probably leaning strawberry.
Okay, fair enough. They're both very good, and it is a very, very close race. All right, Spencer, so last night we were gathered around our televisions, nervous about the results we were going to get, wondering if people would accept it when it came down. And we see the states coming off, bit by bit, and the fear kind of creeps in. And sure enough, BYU comes in at number 9. See what I did there? You thought I was going election. I didn't. Now, as I've been talking about, it doesn't mean that they can't lock in the number 4 seed. Rankings are different than seeds. But I do believe there is a very, very legitimate conversation to be had as to why I would say Indiana and then probably Penn State. I mean, Tennessee has that Bama win. Texas is Texas. But there's a legitimate conversation, and maybe even Miami, because BYU has the 2 top 20 wins. Strength of schedule, I think, is 4. So I do believe it's legitimate to have a beef with BYU at 9, even though I still think the 4 seed is probably the reality. What was your reaction when you saw Brigham Young at 9 last night?
Unfortunately, it was pretty close to what I expected. This has become a situation for me where I feel like Charlie Brown and the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is Lucy, and you just think maybe this time they might let you actually kick the football and respect what you've done, but ultimately they pull the football away, and here we are again. And so I was kind of bracing for that. I thought it would be 8 at worst, so 9 was a little bit of a new territory, and I'm with you. Like, I take issue on a couple of accounts. One, I look at Penn State, and the committee citing, well, the eye test of Indiana and Texas and Miami's explosive offense, like, whatever. If they want to use the eye test for those teams to justify ranking them above BYU, great, that's their prerogative. But what is the eye test on Penn State? What have they done in their 7-point survival win against Bowling Green at home and surviving the Coliseum against the middling USC program to say that our eye test says we should be at number 6? It's like the committee is valuing a 7-point loss to Ohio State more than what BYU has actually done and won in games. Like, BYU played close games. They played and survived against a bad Oklahoma State team. But Penn State survived against Bowling Green, for crying out loud. Like, that's one I do not understand. The second thing I don't like about this is this leaves BYU with very little wiggle room to slip up at any point and hope that they're still going to get in as an at-large. It now feels like BYU has to win the Big 12 championship game and qualify to get to that game to have a shot to be in the playoffs. Like, if they lose in the Big 12 championship, there's still a scenario based on these rankings where the Cougars could be on the outside looking in, which is just super unfortunate because they're not getting the leeway and the wiggle room like teams such as Penn State and Indiana are. So those are my 2 issues.
Yeah, and the message, to your point, it feels like the message is you guys are a one-bid league, regardless of what happens. It does feel like that's the message. Do you think that BYU at 9 is a direct indictment on the Big 12 as a whole, because we do, and I'm sure you guys do it too. Anybody in the state and media does a Big 12 power poll, power rankings, or whatever. And this week I told my producer, I'm like, dude, we're not doing it because the power poll is BYU 1, then everyone else 2 to 16. I don't know who's good. I don't know who's bad. I have no clue. So do you think this ranking last night from the committee is a direct indictment on the Big 12 as a whole? Because I do.
Yeah, and last weekend did not help the cause, right?
Right, yep.
Kansas State losing at Houston, and then Iowa State losing at home to Texas Tech. Like, while those results help BYU's chances of getting to a Big 12 championship game, it worked against the overall perception of the conference and ultimately what the College Football Playoff Selection Committee clearly thinks. Like, if Kansas State had won and Iowa State had won, you and I are probably having a little bit different conversation. I tend to believe that BYU might be at least 8, but because those two teams that were at the top, along with BYU, both lost, and they're jumbled in this crazy Big 12 conference, leaving BYU the only unbeaten, I think that hurt the Cougars going into this first playoff bowl. So I think that's a totally valid and fair point, which is why I was telling people last week, like, yeah, it's good for BYU's championship game chances, but now it feels like this is a one-bid lead.
Yeah, no, I'm with you as far as what the message seems to be. All right, before we get to Saturday night, let's pan back now and look at this thing from 30,000 feet. And, you know, Kalani's my guy, had a Monday, A-Rod, J-Hill, you know, obviously the synergies and the kind of incestuous nature of the two staffs makes this thing kind of fun. But, you know, I'm in contact with them, and they were telling me early on in camp, like, people are wrong about us. But here's the thing. Everybody says that every single year. Every coaching, and certainly in our state where we love to do the nobody believes in us thing, it's like a mantra to go shock the world. And so even though I was hearing from the coaches, like, just wait, this is going to be different, it seemed like everybody else on the outside did not believe this team was going to do much. I pegged them as a 6-7 win team that was going to go bowling. And I thought Utah at this point would be 7-1, 8-0. I thought Utah's offense would be dynamic. I thought their defense would be physical, forcing turnovers, creating chaos. I thought the special teams would be awesome. I thought Rice Eccles would be loud and proud. All of that, Spencer, is happening 40 miles south of where I'm talking right now, down in Provo. What do you attribute this season to most, just right off the top?
I think a couple of things. There is real power, it seems, at BYU in being able to keep the core and just have that natural, evolving nature of a team that, in large part, stays together after having gone through some tough things. So as bad as it was for BYU to limp to a 5-7 finish last year after some gut punch losses to Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, it motivated them in a significant way to stick together. So there weren't a ton of new parts that were added in, and Jake Retzloff has certainly been a pleasant surprise, but he told me what happened late last year pushed me in a way that I've never experienced before, to just be unwavering in how I prepare and what I do, and to get the guys to rally around and to, like you said, go actually shock the world. So that core sticking together in this idea of learning, growing, and using the adversity that you've gone through as a team together as a motivating point to push them harder, no doubt. The other thing I'll say is, while BYU didn't add a ton of pieces, adding Jack Kelly, who's an NFL prospect at linebacker, was huge. And another guy who Jay Hill trusts in his defense, huge. Also, year 2 of the Jay Hill defense should not be understated. It takes a while, and Jay told me before the season began, Spencer, we will be clearly a much better team than we were last year, just because it takes time. And my defense is bought in. They understand things. So instead of them second-guessing where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing and getting to places late, now they just know. And that will make a difference. And so he told me, I interpreted that as, okay, I think BYU is going to win 7 or 8 games. And I got laughed and scorned when I said they had a shot at winning 8 games. But here we are. And they are on the cusp of surpassing that very soon. But yeah, so year 2 of Jay Hill, the core sticking together, and then a few key transfers. And I'll finish with T.J. Woods as an offensive line coach that BYU went out and paid. They actually invested in a guy, and they spent a little bit of money, and they went and got their guy to help out. And the improvement of the offensive line cannot be I don't even know how to give it its due justice. But Caleb Etienne was terrible last year for BYU, and now he's back on NFL radars. To lose your starting center, Connor Pay, and then have a guy who's making his first start and Bruce Mitchell come in, and it seems pretty seamless. That's all on T.J. Woods as well. So some big coaching hires on the offensive line, year 2 of Jay Hill, and just the core sticking together, Spence, is kind of how I see why BYU has been able to do this.
And excuse me, I know I'm about to ask you the following question in the midst of an incredibly special season. So, the answer, of course, is going to be yes for today. But as you know, we all are part of an echo chamber based off of our inner circle, family, friends.
Yes.
And I was raised tried and true BYU blue with a brother-in-law who still wears a T-shirt with his freaking Helaman Halls number on it that I want to rip off him every time I see it, okay? So I know, Spencer, that there were a lot of people that were down on Kalani at one point and not sure if this was the guy. He's my guy, and so I want to make sure that he's taken care of. Has he answered every question, and do you think it's a situation where maybe they're going to take care of him the way they take care of their basketball coach now?
It is time. I'll say this much, Spence. I don't know what Kalani's compensation and how BYU has specifically taken care of him by the numbers, but I have been told that he is in a better position than any previous BYU football coach has been in, and they have every intention of sweetening the deal for him as he pushes forward. So, and he has absolutely earned that right. So you're good to look out for him. I trust the administration that tells me he is being very fairly taken care of, and they have no intention of doing anything but sweetening the pot for him, especially after a season like this.
It's good to hear, man, because I'll tell you what, I'm not sure how many jobs Kalani would leave BYU for, but I wouldn't be stunned if Southern Cal is looking around like, what'd we do? And, they want to buy out with Lincoln. I don't know if that's happening because they're paying him a ton of money, but if there's one job Kalani would look at, it has to be Southern Cal. So if they don't take care of him, man, I do think at one point he might look around. I don't know that, but that's just my gut feeling.
How do you not, though? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Any good agent's going to say, you need to look at this. And Kalani's agent would say that if that were the case. So I'm with you. BYU needs to continue to do what they said they're going to do and take care of him.
All right, before we get to the game in a vacuum on Saturday, I'm a little older than you, but you and I both raised playing sports, raised with the BYU-Utah rivalry as part of our lives, and now being in the media for a number of years, we've covered it. Is there one moment, is it back to Harline, is it 4th and 18? Is there one BYU-Utah rivalry moment that for you, Spencer, stands out above the rest?
Yeah, back to Harline obviously was remarkable. I mean, remarkable. And then on the Utah side, you go back to the Utes erasing a 20-0 halftime lead, and then for BYU, and then even being down 27-7 to watch the Utes storm back and win that game. As hard as it was for BYU fans to watch, that is, I will never forget what Rice Eccles Stadium sounded like, felt like in that moment. It was electric. It was special. So those are two that I have been in Rice Eccles Stadium for that have been dynamite. I know Hall to George gets a lot of attention. But one that might be a little off the radar that resonated with me was actually 1996 when BYU and Utah were playing for the WAC championship and that spot in the WAC title game in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
The winner of that game was going to go to Vegas. Utah was good. I mean, there's Chris Matumaafala and big physical teams, and BYU went into Rice Eccles and ran for like 350 yards, and Steve Sarkisian only threw 12 passes the entire game, and BYU stunned Utah. And I remember sitting there as like a 9th grader or a 10th grader and thinking, how did BYU do that? Because Utah's good. So that one was a memorable one for me is when I was in my formative years growing up in this rivalry, because I expected something entirely different, and then BYU essentially out Utah by running the ball at them nonstop. And frankly, Spence, that's the last time BYU had a convincing win against Utah. It's always been close, and you got to go all the way back to '96 to find a blowout for BYU, whereas Utah has enjoyed several in the past 25 years.
And because of the dynamic of this game, regardless of the situations between the two teams, the chaos is possible. Now, where I'm at is if there's anybody out there that is pointing to any number or any data to indicate Utah is a better team than BYU, then they're looking at numbers that I don't see. There's no proof. There's no proof that Utah is better than BYU. Not Vegas, not any of the rankings. There's some numbers that indicate Utah's defense is still very good. They're doing the quarterback thing, Now, for me, Spencer, I'm not reporting this because I don't know it. We're going to interview Coach Witt on Friday after having Kalani on Monday. Brandon Rose was made available to the media for the first time on Tuesday, and my man spoke like he's playing. But I don't know. Okay, so that's my guess. Ultimately, how much does that matter? We'll see. There's a new play caller. There's no other way to say it. The offense is atrocious, and BYU rolls in here as a 4-point favorite. I think I heard you say the stat, because I listen to the pod. I've got you guys on in the car. That hit me across the face when you said BYU has outscored teams off turnovers 69-10, which says two things. Holy bleep, that's impressive, and that can't continue, right? So I have a hard time believing Utah's going to win this football game, but I've seen so many of these things get weird that I'm not ready to say one way or the other. What's your gut tell you about Saturday night?
That it will be weird. That's what my gut tells me for sure.
Yep.
The one thing that BYU has to absolutely avoid if they want to win this game is doing what they really haven't done all year, and that is being reckless and careless with the football. Because Utah's defense is still so solid and so capable of ramping up a hornet's nest of a home stadium if they can get one of those terminal turnovers against BYU and score a defensive touchdown and put BYU in a weird mental space. That, to me, is how Utah can go and win this game, especially if it's early in the game and it just sets the tone for the remainder of the night. That Utah defense is still really, really formidable, even though they've had at times trouble stopping the run. Overall, statistically, like you pointed out, they're pretty good. And so, to me, it is as simple as BYU taking care of the football and not losing the turnover margin. I believe that if they do that, Cougars will find a way to manufacture 24 points somehow with their offense and be able to hold Utah to under 24. Frankly, Utah hasn't scored, more than 23 in any game against Power 4 competition.
Mm-hmm.
So if you allow the Utes a defensive touchdown, then maybe they climb over 24 against the P4 team for the first time this year and shock BYU and, in a way, salvage their season and probably still get to a bowl game. So a lot on the line for sure, but I mean, my gut feeling is yes, I expect weird, loud, and I know there's a lot of rhetoric about Utah fans not showing up. I don't buy into it. I think there's going to be a sea of red, and I think that there should be, because there's so much to play for and so much on the line here for both teams.
You making the trip up this way? You're going to stay down south?
I will be on the sideline.
Very nice.
So I'm going to experience it, and I love college football. I love this rivalry, and I'm excited for it to be in the same conference again after a long, long time off.
All right, man. Well, I'll keep an eye out for you because I'll be there. I'll say what's up. I appreciate your time. Fun week, dude, so I'll see you Saturday, okay?
You got it, brother. Be well.
All right, Spencer Litton, BYU TV. We're live today at Beer Bar, and a celebrity has stopped by. Richard Smith is here. So if you've ever wanted to meet the great Richard Smith and have a beer, he will not have one, but you can, and hang out with him here at Beer Bar. I also have tailgate passes for our Utah BYU tailgate, okay? So with these, you get free craft cocktails from Clearwater Distilling. We've got non-alcoholic options if you don't drink, and free food from Wingers. Porter's going to be doing our pregame show live from the tailgate at 4:15. I'll roll through. Isaac Asiata will be there. It's a great tailgate. It's right by the Big Smith's tailgate on Guardsman's Way. And just for stopping in a beer bar and saying hello, I'll hook you up with 2 of them. We're going to do 2 per person, and we have 10 total. So come by. Here's the address, 161 East, 200 South here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. All right, more college football coming up next. Josh Pate stops by. I always enjoy my conversations with Josh. Move over to Neil Smith and the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, maybe live on site. If you've ever wanted to meet Bill, potentially at 4:30, we're going to see if we can get him down here. So a lot to do live at Beer Bar on a Wednesday. Keep it here on ESPN 700. All right, we're live today at Beer Bar right downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Great sausages and burgers, about 130 beers on tap. Another 40, 50 can and bottled beers, non-alcoholic options for those of you who don't drink. It's oddly crowded on this Wednesday. I think people are either celebrating or drowning their sorrows. We have tailgate passes for the Utah BYU tailgate coming up on Saturday. But let's do some more college football. Always enjoy my time with my next guest, the great Josh Pate from Josh Pate's College Football Show on a Wednesday afternoon. Josh, happy Wednesday, buddy. How we doing?
I'm good. I assume that there are a multitude of reasons for people to be on edge out there and gearing up for this weekend, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, certainly. And obviously, Josh, last night we were all sitting in front of our TVs. We're nervous about the results that are going to roll in. We see state by state by state by state, and then it's revealed that BYU comes in at 9. See, you thought I was doing an election thing, and I wasn't doing an election thing. I was doing a CFP ranking thing. So a lot of people around here wondering, BYU at 9 with a resume that you could argue is better than Indiana at 8, and maybe even Penn State at 6. I mean, BYU is undefeated. They have 2 top 20 wins. They're number 4 in strength of schedule. What's the Josh Pate take on BYU coming in at 9 last night?
I thought they'd be higher, honestly. I think they should be higher. I mean, as much as I personally like to traffic in the way I stack teams based on a more pure power rating model, that's not what the playoff committee is supposed to be doing.
Right.
The playoff committee is supposed to be judging purely off merit. And you notice how after all these years we never have a static list of criteria put out, and that's very purposeful. It's so they can move the goalposts as much as they need to. And I'm not normally the one that's banging that drum, but I will bang it here. I'll bang it for both of them, actually. I'd make that case for Indiana if they were wearing a Michigan helmet. I'd make that case for Brigham Young if they were wearing a different helmet. They would be treated differently. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, what aggravates me to no end is all these people who want to tell you, bro, relax. It doesn't matter. It's just the first version of the rankings. Well, they're lying to you. It does matter. And here's where it matters. It doesn't matter if Brigham Young wins out. Of course they'll be in. They were always going to be in if they won the conference. But where it matters, where rubber meets road, is they are building a giant trap door under your feet and under Indiana's feet to where they can reasonably pat themselves on the back for having ranked you top 10. But you know full well, just like I do, as soon as either one of those teams incurs one loss, they're gone. Trapdoor opens and they disappear from the horizon, and that committee says, well, we gave them a shot. They didn't take care of business. Meanwhile, I got Penn State sitting at 6 after losing to Ohio State at home last weekend, which is just amazing to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Outside of BYU, outside of Indiana, you kind of gave us your take on Penn State. Any other Josh Pate reactions, either good or bad, from the rest of the rankings, which aren't the seeding for the bracket, but night one of the rankings? What are your other thoughts away from the dynamics we've already discussed?
I thought it was interesting that 7 of the top 16 teams in that thing are SEC, but a lot of them are in the 10 to 16 range. Like, you got your Alabamas and your LSUs, and they'll play this weekend. A&M and Ole Miss are in there. So there's going to be probably some elimination blows dealt, which is fine. That's the way it's supposed to work. But we're also in the situation where, we are looking at a situation rapidly approaching where the SEC is going to kind of judge themselves and judge how their future they want to pan out based on how the committee handles them this cycle. And what I mean by that, if they don't get as many teams in as they want or they think they deserve, Big Ten, you could fill in the blank same way here. They've got that look-in provision in that playoff contract in 2 years, and they may very well want to take their ball and go home or go elsewhere, and I'm paying close attention to that right now.
So ultimately, it does feel like the other message that has been sent, and I don't even know if this is the wrong message because, we do a Big 12 power rankings every week. Anybody who covers the conference does something like it. You have your JP poll, and this week I told my producer we're not doing it because it sounds like BYU at 1, then everyone else 2 through 16, and I don't know if they're good or bad. I mean, the problem is the conference is chaotic. So is this a message sent with BYU at 9 that the Big 12, period, end of story, is a one-bid league, and that's going to go to the conference champ no matter what?
That's a big question I have. I heard them say last night, or I saw it reported, that they're trying to crystallize the notion that you won't get punished for playing in a conference title game, which is great. That's the way it should be. Okay, I don't doubt that for the Big Ten. I don't doubt that for the SEC. I don't think their conference title loser will fall very far. I want to see what happens. We kind of need the case study here of Brigham Young goes undefeated all the way to Dallas, and then they lose in the conference title game. They would almost assuredly, they would absolutely be a top 10 team going into that Saturday. If they lose in a game that they're only in because they earned the right to be in, are you going to drop them out of the rankings? Because if you don't, then they go as well as the Big 12 champ going, and that means two Big 12 teams just crashed the party. And I know that this is not the way it's supposed to work, but this is the way it will work. The folks in the SEC portion of the room will scream about that. The folks in the Big Ten portion of the room will scream about that. That is not why they expanded this thing. Now, that is not why they built more seats at the table. Those seats are not for everyone else. Those seats are for more of who's already been there.
One more thing on this. Boise State comes in, and look, Boise State's good. We're kind of in that footprint because Utah State, a Mountain West Conference team. Is there any way Boise State, in your estimation, and of course there's no way of knowing for sure because ultimately the football needs to be played, but there are only a few spots behind BYU. Is there any way Boise State could catapult past a Big 12 champ and get a top 4 seed, and therefore that Boise gets the bye and the Big 12 champ is there at 5?
I think it's possible. You'd probably need a little chaos here down the stretch, and then one of the teams that emerges from the chaos ends up being the winner of the Big 12 championship game, so maybe like a 2-loss conference champ there. Then I could see it. If it's just Brigham Young going on a run, no, I think they'd enjoy the higher seeds.
I've got one more BYU question for you, then we'll move on, and obviously want to talk about the big game coming up on Saturday night. But you referenced something early on in the interview about, the Michigan helmet or the Penn State brand, and certainly there's going to be brand bias, and there are television executives that simply want the biggest and best brand on their TV show, and I understand that. What, from a national standpoint, and not necessarily you, because you cover and understand every team in college football, which makes you, good at what you do, but how would you articulate as a national college football guy what BYU's brand is nationwide?
I think the brand is tucked away and isolated, hard to get to, really hard-nosed team, hard-nosed program. They embody the mentality of their head coach. It's kind of always been that way there. There are echoes from the past of big-time teams. You hear from your dad. If you're my age, you've heard from your dad growing up about Brigham Young teams that did big things in the 80s, and you know of a few big-time names who have come through there. As for today, I think that people are still getting used to BYU being in the Big 12, first off. Like a lot of people have put 2 and 2 together there. And then when they do, they probably lump them in with every other Big 12 team, and that you've got to earn benefit of the doubt in their mind. Thought position is you're lesser than because you don't have an SEC or a Big Ten helmet sticker on. And I think that's the way the average college football fan views Brigham Young right now.
So we have a little football game here in the market coming up on Saturday night. I made a plea early on to get a Josh Pate appearance out here for Utah BYU, but that was dependent upon both teams doing their jobs. BYU has, Utah has not. We can be simply as reductive as saying Cameron Rising's not under center and he's been hurt, therefore everything is different, but nobody saw 4-4 for Utah, and no one saw 8-0 for BYU. Everything I thought Utah would be, BYU has been. How surprised are you, Josh, on that dynamic?
I'm very surprised. If you told me I wasn't coming out there, I would have thought it was because one of these teams dropped the ball. I would just have the wrong team circled.
Right.
And so as it turns out, it surprises me only because Cam Rising not being available is not the biggest shock to anyone in the world. I just thought the program may be a tad bit more equipped to deal with it. And maybe I was wrong, or maybe I was just overestimating how difficult that is to continue to prepare for. But, I wanted to be out there now. We had it circled internally. I had it on the grease board in the office internally. But plans changed as the season unfolded.
Yes, indeed. I can't argue with it. As much as we would have loved to host you once again like we did last year against Florida. One more Big 12 question, then we'll do some other stuff with the remaining few minutes, and then I'll set you loose. Outside of Brigham Young, who do you think is good in the conference? Because I really can't figure it out week to week.
I think Colorado's the biggest wild card out there.
Yeah.
Colorado has improved defensively fairly significantly. They run the ball much better than they did. So they're a complimentary, improving football team. And last week I thought they were the biggest winner out there, even though they didn't play, because Iowa State and Kansas State went down. I don't trust Kansas State away from home at all right now. Iowa State, I thought they had been skating on thin ice with hot blades for a few weeks and got a loss dealt to them by another team that's pretty good wild card in Texas Tech. I kind of think that may end up being good for them. Just in that it allows you to hit the reset button a little bit. You're no longer dealing with the pressure of undefeated. Now, you just go play. Every one of your goals is still in front of you. Just go play. I'm still a very strong staff he has. It was one of my biggest concerns coming into the year, and it has really manifested itself into a poor result. I give them credit. They went and played BYU hard in the game they played against them a few weeks back. Still lost, but I expected that team to kind of roll over, and they didn't. But it's not a good team this year, and it's a shame because they had a lot of returning pieces that look like it may be otherwise, but they have not even given themselves a chance.
You referenced Colorado, and I'm not sure that I've really ever seen a talent like Travis Hunter. Shouldn't he win the Heisman Trophy, Josh? And if not, who do you think does?
I think it's going to come down to, is he active on Conference Championship Saturday?
Yeah.
It's going to be him and Cam Ward, I believe. And Dylan Gabriel may be in that equation, but the thing about those other guys is Gabriel will be playing in the Big Ten title game, I think. I think Cam Ward certainly will be playing in the ACC title game. If Hunter is just playing on that last Saturday, I think that's going to make a big difference. So otherwise, I think the voters are going to be willing. I think a lot of voters are looking for a reason to vote him. And it may come down to that. It may be as simple as that.
All right, moving off the Big 12 now. Just simple question: how good do you think Miami is? It's another team when you're looking at the resume and they're number 4, and of course the bottom line is staying clean, which they've done. But do you think their record, where they're at right now, accurately reflects simply how good they are? And if they have the opportunity to go against another one of those teams that live in that cul-de-sac, do they stack up in your mind?
Talent-wise, they do. I don't think the product they've put on the field measures quite yet, but we can't be sure because they haven't been pushed to the brink against quality competition. They've been pushed to the brink, but it's almost one of those situations where they played with their food a little too long and then took it serious in the end. If I put them on the field with Texas or Georgia, I don't really know what I should expect from them in that scenario. I think we'll end up seeing it because I think they'll be in the postseason. But the other thing I wonder with them is I remember kind of two different versions of LSU. The 2019 and 2023 LSU teams. They both had Heisman quarterbacks. One of them got its act together enough defensively to become a superpower team in 2019. Wasn't always that way. Last year's LSU team, Heisman quarterback, but couldn't stop molasses in December defensively, and so they wasted that Heisman season and never accomplished anything of note in the postseason. Miami's going to go one of those two directions here. I'm just waiting to see which one.
Do you think, we were discussing this earlier because we were talking about BYU and Kalani Sitake and whether or not they were going to actually step up and pay him. It's a private institution, but they're known for not paying their coaches very much. And look, I have no inside information or knowledge at all about where Southern Cal's head is with Lincoln, but ultimately Kalani's a Southern California guy, and if that job came open, I think he would answer the phone if they called. I don't know if they would, but that's a long way of me asking you. Do you think Southern Cal is looking around wondering if they have the right guy after this really, really rough first season in the Big Ten?
I think they may look around and ask the questions. I don't think they're looking around in the form of, let's do our due diligence because we may make a move. I think they're a long way from that. I did a segment on the show last night, just did job approval ratings. And Lincoln Riley's approval rating would be a little low right now, but that's kind of detached from his hot seat rating. I don't think his hot seat rating's anywhere. I'd say the same thing about Hugh Freeze at Auburn, for that matter. But I will say this. They've got 5 losses, and they've led in the fourth quarter of all 5 of those games. I mean, they're half a dozen plays that you change in their season, they're undefeated, which means nothing other than to say they're not a long way away. It's not Florida State, where they're just dead on arrival, and there are so many problems you don't even know where to start. He started. He replaced his defensive staff. They look a lot better this year. I mean, it's probably as simple as you don't have Caleb Williams anymore, and you need to go find the next version of him.
Where's the Josh Pate Tour taking place coming up this weekend? Where are you going to be?
We are headed down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana for Alabama at LSU on a Saturday night.
You know, I've never experienced that game. I have experienced LSU, but I've heard that's the spot, man. That's the place to be with that game. Well, I would imagine you've been there before. So what's that atmosphere going to be like as Bama is down in Baton Rouge to take on LSU?
The best way I can describe it is if you're standing on a runway at a major airport and you just hear jet engines around you, that's kind of the way it sounds on the field there in big third down moments. And especially at night, especially if Alabama or Florida, someone like that's in there. I mean, especially if LSU shows some life early and they get up on someone early, it feels like you weigh 150 pounds or 150% of your body weight. You just presses down on you. It is really, really difficult to operate in that environment.
We do like to keep track of our former Pac-12 buddies. What's the hullabaloo like, the conversation like down there with Alabama and our old buddy Kalen DeBoer, who's a great coach, but he's not Nick Saban because nobody is.
Yeah, there's a lot of attention on that this week. Just people, and myself included, wondering how they'll handle this moment, because they did not handle Tennessee well for many different reasons. But one of them was Bama under Nick Saban was a big game program. And I ironically used to feel more confident in them when they were on the road than I did when they were at home. I just thought they handled that stuff so well. And it's really early with DeBoer. We have like a one-game sample size. But I didn't like the way they handled the trip to Tennessee. I think it was a learning experience for him. This will be another one. Both of them are coming out of the bye. Really interested to see how Jalen Milroe performs, how healthy he looks. They'll tell you he's healthy now. I don't believe them. So huge wild card. Both teams are huge wild cards right now.
Last thing is Oregon firmly entrenched themselves as the best team in the country, and if not, who else is in that? Kind of just in that area as of now.
They're the best I've seen. I think Texas has higher end potential. I think Ohio State has high end potential. Oregon's the best I've seen. I've seen them all in person, some of them a couple of times at this point. They are so multifaceted. They have got an assassin at quarterback right now. They can run the ball on you. They can stop the run. They're very multiple and athletic defensively. I think they're going to get Tez Johnson back before the end of the year. So that's the one I'd like to be if I could pick any team to be right now.
Josh, thanks, man, for the time. Keep up the great work and enjoy the games this weekend, all right?
All right, appreciate it.
Josh Pate, host of the Josh Pate's College Football Show. It's one of my favorite college football podcasts. Josh is a very talented guy. Find him on social media. On Twitter, it's at Josh Pate CFB or X or whatever the hell we're calling it, certainly the day after what happened yesterday. At Josh Pate CFB is where you find him. All right, we're going to do a little hockey with Neil Smith coming up behind the glass. The Utah Hockey Club is going in the wrong direction. A lot of L's as of late. Long season, so we'll bring in Neil. Voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, potentially on site, maybe over the phone. We're not sure yet. Because we are out and about today at Beer Bar, right downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. So come on by and say hello. We have tailgate passes to give away for our Utah BYU tailgates, 2 per person, just for stopping in. It's 161 East, 200 South. We have great food from Wingers. We have craft cocktails from Clearwater Distilling. So come on down to Beer Bar. The parking situation downtown is way better than it's been in, feels like years. So 161 East, 200 South is where you find us. Come on down and say hi. All right, before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Clearwater Distilling. It's the only distillery in Utah County open on Sundays. With the holidays around the corner, keep Clearwater Distilling in mind. Make Clearwater a one-stop shop with their bottles, stocking stuffers, and gift cards. It's a new rebrand of their cinnamon whiskey. It's now called Canella Cinnamon Whiskey, formerly known as Scandalust. Visit them in Pleasant Grove. Check out the Victorian Cigar and Tasting Room. You can grab a bottle there in Pleasant Grove. You can buy their spirits in state liquor stores, online, or take a trip to the beautiful distillery. More information can be found at clearwaterdistilling.com. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go on this Wednesday. We've caught up with Pablo Mastroeni for a little RSL, Spencer Litton, our buddy from BYU TV, and then a fun chat with Josh Pate, a little college football with Josh. So we'll do a little hockey with Neil Smith coming up next. Then we'll get back to Utah BYU with Bill Riley. Then from there, we'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program on a Wednesday afternoon. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, we're live today at Beer Bar. It's right downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, and we're having a good time, always do. You can come on down and grab a couple of tailgate passes for our Utah BYU tailgates prior to kick. Kick is 8:15 Saturday night. The pregame coverage will begin at 4:15. So if you are looking for something to do prior to the game, if you want some craft cocktails from Clearwater Distilling or some free food from Wingers, we also have non-alcoholic options, of course. Come on by Beer Bar, 2 per person, and while supplies last, we have 10. So we'll hook you up with a couple of passes just for rolling on in here at Beer Bar on this Wednesday afternoon. It is 161. Just had the address. It is 161 East, 200 South, downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. They've got great burgers and brats. They've got fries. The fries are awesome. Of course, a bunch of beers on tap if you guys want to roll by. Porter, do you have your pregame lineup dialed in for the radio station on Saturday?
As dialed in as it's going to get, because we have a on-site kind of event going on with our friends at the NFL Players Association and a coat drive. So, yeah, Isaac Asiato will be alongside me for most of the ride, but we'll also have Stevenson Sylvester and Austin Colley and a bunch of the guys that will be there from both BYU and Utah, trying to combine teams for a good cause, trying to get 2,024 coats to donate for the upcoming winter season. So that's the goal. We're going to be actually not at the 700 tailgate. We're going to be across the street at the actual Guardsman tailgate with Nate Orchard and the folks up there. So looking forward to it. But yeah, we'll give folks the details as it comes along. And obviously, you're going to want to be warm on Saturday, but keep in mind and just a few days in advance, if you have an extra coat in the closet, maybe some the kids don't wear anymore, throw it in the truck, throw it in the car, and bring it on your way on Saturday.
There we go. That will be an excellent time, so stay tuned for that and set your alarm on Saturday to remind you of the pregame show starting at 4:15, and then Bill, Sly, and Scott will have you taken care of after that. Bill's going to roll on the show today. Not sure if it'll be in person or over the phone. Ran into Riles at the studios earlier, the Broadway Media Studios. He was once a midday radio host for us before he got big time and went to the U. Porter, we have not heard from you much this week because we have been busy, and you're keeping us on air, and you're making phone calls, and you're playing music, and you're pushing buttons, and you're eating Uncrustables. So you're doing a lot of things. BYU at this point is a 4-point favorite, and I would be surprised if the line moves from 4, barring some unforeseen last-minute injury news or a different starting quarterback, like if Jake Retzlaff had to sit because of an injury suffered this week or whatever it is. I think that's probably where it's going to settle. What's your confidence level based off of, as we've talked about with our guests, go ahead and dig through the data. There's nothing out there right now, whether it's records, there's certainly defensive metrics that indicate Utah's defense is still elite, but BYU has earned the right to be the favorite Saturday night. But this game gets weird, as you know. So what's your gut tell you about what we'll see Saturday night?
Yeah, well, I think the gut feeling is along the, pardon the pun, along the lines of the line. It really is one where, I think it will be a close game, but Utah, in order to win, would have to win the turnover battle. They would have to, turn a blocked field goal or an interception into a touchdown. One of those situations where you are a little outmatched with personnel because of injuries and because of the place you are in the season. And I do think that BYU has the upper hand, but the fact that you're in Rice Eccles Stadium, the fact that it's Kyle Whittingham versus a bunch of guys that he kind of taught how to do the thing, I think it's going to be a stalemate, Spence. I really do. I don't know about 3-0. I think we're in a different era of college football, but Jay Hill versus Kyle Whittingham on a cold November, I don't know that we're going to see very many points, and that 4-point spread is one that I don't know that I'd really touch it, because I think that this game very well could be decided by a field goal, and if not, then it's probably a comfortable BYU win. But I just don't really see it getting out of hand in that regard.
Okay, so I've talked about this as far as my own personal opinion, and we've asked other people as far as, Scott Mitchell, et cetera, about their opinion on this. I don't know, man. There was something about Brandon Rose on Tuesday who was made available to the media. To me, Porter, he was talking like a kid that's going to get the start. He was talking like a kid that was going to play. That's my guess. I don't know what the deal is with Isaac's wrist. If he has legitimately been hurt, then that might explain quite a bit. But what does your gut tell you on who's going to start under center? And if so, what sort of difference, generally speaking, do you think that makes?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, part of the story here is that Isaac Wilson has been dealing with a wrist injury. He's been dealing with, I think, some rib stuff. Like, he's just been beat up. It's a kid who, let's be real, wasn't expecting to take a bunch of snaps this year. And there is an adjustment that your body has to make when you go from playing, as we've talked about, from playing Farmington and Lone Peak or whoever to playing Big 12 opponents. There's an adjustment your body takes. Usually 5 to 10 pounds of muscle is what every college coach tries to give every incoming freshman, something Isaac hasn't had a chance to do. So part of this conversation is the fact that he is a little bit banged up. But as you mentioned, Brandon Rose sounded like a guy who's preparing to play. Now, what I'll say about that is that Brandon Rose kind of always talks like that. That's just the confidence that the kid kind of walks around with. And whether that is real, you have to go into this game thinking that you may possibly see both of them, Spence, just with the way the season has gone and with the length of leash that I think the OC and head coach are going to give either of the quarterbacks that may take a snap for Utah on Saturday.
So another interesting narrative, and we talked to Spencer Linton from BYU TV about this earlier, and I want to be careful because maybe I'm being part of the problem. I simply have heard from and am aware of more than a few Utah fans that do not want to be there on Saturday, and according to what they've shared with me, they have sold their tickets. And some of the tickets online are very expensive, and so maybe this is a way you can recoup some of your season ticket deposit or what have you. But I don't know that is going to have a massive effect on the crowd on Saturday. You have a different echo chamber than I do. What sort of feedback are you getting from people or you fans that you know about their plans on Saturday night?
Yeah, well, I think there's always going to be a healthy interest in this game, in particular with it being Utah BYU. I think the environment in the stadium is going to be a lot of fun. I don't really see any ifs, ands, or buts about that, but I do think there is a healthy contingent of Utah fans that, because of the way not only this year played out, but also last year, and because of the expectations that they had, some of them, Spence, they're not missing this game because they're not, cheering for Utah. They're going to go home and still cheer for their team, but they had such high expectations for this game and for this season that they thought, a month or two ago that they would be watching an undefeated Utah team playing a lesser BYU team, and their team would be the one fighting for a chance at the college football playoff. And I think because of that letdown, there are quite a few fans that are saying, hey, why don't I make a few $100 and watch the game from down the road and sell my ticket and go from there? I have seen a good amount of people that are at least talking about that online or listing their tickets. It's not going to be more BYU fans here than Utah fans. That's not going to happen. But there will be a healthy contingent of Cougar fans at Rice Eccles on Saturday. And if things start to go their way, they can get loud. So either way, it's going to be a fun environment. We've seen it. One of my favorite memories of this rivalry is one covered in person with the comeback game, right, with Jason Shelley and the 27-7 comeback. That game and that environment was really fun in multiple different directions. First, with an actual really loud section of BYU fans that were involved and interested as the game started, and then as the comeback rolled along, the crowd just started to move and jolt, and you could feel the energy start to really fill up in that stadium. And then, of course, the touchdown Jason Shelley scored, the roof, that if that place had a roof, it would have blown off on that touchdown. So I have no questions about the environment. What we'll see But yeah, I do think there will be a healthy contingent of Cougar fans in Rice-Eccles Stadium on Saturday that maybe wouldn't have been able to get tickets had Utah been more what we expected at kickoff.
That comeback, that 27-7 comeback, still to this day.
Ridiculous.
Oh, my gosh. And you know what's interesting? Because I was thinking about this. And, I never played for a paycheck. But if you played sports throughout the course of your life growing up, like in high school or college or whatever, and you never got paid to do it, there's a good chance you played against a rival. And I had two, during my time playing. And I'm not the radio guy that compares his slightly above average high school basketball playing career to these guys that are playing for money. But there's just something so different when you know that you're playing against a rival. The whole energy is different all week. I love it. I always have. I just think that's kind of how I'm wired. I know some people aren't necessarily all that fond of the anxiety that this week seems to bring some people. I mean, people will say mean things to you during Elders Quorum if BYU wins, and, the internet is where cowards go to feel brave, so you're going to get some guff online. But what about you and this dynamic of this week? Because, Spencer Linton, BYU TV, had joined us earlier. One of his peers is a former producer of mine named Jason Shepard, and Shep produced the show I did with Bill for about 5 years or so before I went over to my other station. And I can remember every year Shep would show up for work on Monday of rivalry week, and he would look like he hasn't slept in 2 weeks. He's not a drinker, but he looked like he was just smashing Jaeger all night, and he hated it. And he's not alone. There are some people that are like that because of the potential ramifications of having their feel-goods hurt if their preferred team loses this game. You were an athlete. I mean, when it comes to simply knowing that you're going up against your biggest rival, is that an energetic feel that you enjoy, or do you understand where people are coming from when they kind of just back away from the dynamics of this week?
Well, I think it depends on the position you're in, Spence. I think that if you're winning, if you're confident, if you feel like your rival is not up to par, like, I think a lot of Utah teams felt like over the last decade and a half with BYU, then yeah, you're stoked. You're going into that game with really not much to lose and a bunch to put on the highlight tape and a lot of fun to have, right? And if you are going into a rivalry game with a bunch of pressure on your back and you don't necessarily feel like you have what it takes to play with the team across from you, maybe you're having a down year and it's a game where it means more than maybe another game on the docket. Those are all variables that play into how you approach a rivalry game. And for this one in particular, if you're Utah, there's not much to lose anymore. So I don't know how much the pressure should really mount on you outside of course, your head ball coach. I'm sure instilling in you how important the game might be to him. There's not much pressure. You're 4-4. The Big 12's out of reach. For BYU, that's the team that now is within the top 12 of the CFP. That's the team with a bunch to lose. And when you add that on top of a rivalry, that can get nerve-wracking. That can bring in a pressure, a feel that can kind of start to seep into maybe your thoughts the day before and into prep. And I do wonder if that's the feel for BYU. Credit to Kalani and co. They've been able to, keep things in-house and really play that underdog role for the entirety of this year. Can they keep that going on Saturday and continue that focus is a big question. But, yeah, the rivalry definitely adds a different aspect. But it's also about where the two teams are coming into that game, not just about the fact that they have a history and a hate for each other.
Tell me, just from your vantage point, because you were up at the football facility and, you hear the sound, you're watching the local TV guys at night kind of break some things down and watching the video they're able to get. We're not able to get much because we don't see practice anymore. But, in politics, there's this thing where they call the October surprise, where something happens that is crazy, that throws a wrench into the election. And BYU, Utah, you kind of just wait for the surprise during the week of the player who says the thing to get the ire of the other fan base. And that player this week was Jalen Glover, who drops an F-bomb and later apologized via social media. I thought Austin Colley's comments yesterday on the show were really interesting. We had Austin, former BYU and NFL receiver, on the show when he said he was like disappointed that Jalen apologized because he likes stuff like that. And I think a lot of competitors do. But have you witnessed anything, going up there, being around the players? Because, look, it's hard at this point for the coaching staff to keep these young men motivated when all of the things we thought they'd be in the mix for are no longer on the table. I mean, as I continue to say, the only thing worse than playing in a throwaway bowl game is not being eligible for one. So, yes, they're still get to 6 wins, get to 7 wins, get to a bowl game. And, who knows, maybe 8 wins still on the table. Unfortunately, my confidence in this team dwindled. I felt like I was the last one hanging on the proverbial final branch before my face hit the ground, but my face is clearly in the mud at this point. Have you noticed anything to indicate that the motivation to continue to climb without the reward that was on the table has waned a little bit, or does it still feel like they're kind of ready to roll?
Well, it's hard because the energy definitely has waned, but without seeing them play against BYU, seeing them here at Rice Eccles and seeing their response to that, Spence, I don't know. I think we have to see how they respond and how they react to that on Saturday, right? Because it wasn't until you dropped to 4-4 that you really, really kind of have all that set in, right? I think with 3 losses on the schedule, you look around and you think we can play our way back in, or we can at least stay above 500, get into a decent bowl game. Now it's a sobering moment where you have to look in the mirror and kind of reflect a little bit. And I think there was some of that Utah certainly has gone through over the last couple of weeks, because I can tell you up at that facility, it's quiet, man. It's usually not that way. It's quiet. It doesn't feel like it usually does during the season, because that team's usually used to winning a bunch of football games and having a bunch of fun. And I think that's okay sometimes, right? It's okay to have those peaks and valleys. But for Utah, it's about how you respond. And if you can do so, if you can't do it this weekend against your arch rival in state in a game where you really don't have anything to lose, then yes, I definitely think there is a problem, and I definitely think that there is something going on in that locker room. But you got to give them the chance to respond first, and I do think that they do have at least some guys in the locker room that are pretty capable of driving that ship.
Just real quick, is my name still on the football facility up on campus?
Part of it, yes. Spence.
Well, what's my name?
Spencer.
What's my name for the show?
We gotta be proper here.
What's my name for the show?
Yeah.
It's The Drive with who?
Spence Checketts. Okay.
Yeah, and what's the name on the building?
Spence Eccles.
So, it says Spence, right?
It does.
Okay. That's all I needed to know. Well said. All right,
you gotta get the energy up.
Yeah.
Bringing it in there, Spence.
That's why, with my name on the facility, I need these young men to go out and show the community they're still playing for me.
That's fair.
That's just what I'm hoping for. So, reminder, our pregame coverage on Saturday will begin at 8:15, and we're going to be live at the tailgate. And if you guys want to come hang out with us, I've got tailgate passes down here at Beer Bar. So come on by and say hello. The address is 161 East, 200 South. And, yeah, just for coming by and saying what's up, I'll hook you up with a couple of tailgate passes. I do a lot of remotes at Beer Bar, and it is relatively crowded today, and I don't know what to make of it. Celebratory beers, drowning sorrows, probably depends on how you digested last night. But come by and say what's up at 161 East, 200 South, 2 per person while supplies last. And we have craft cocktails from Clearwater Distilling. We also have free food from Wingers. It's really good. And if you guys are looking for something to do prior to kick at 8:15 on Saturday, come by Beer Bar. Love to shake your hand and say hello and hook you up with a couple of these passes and come hang out with us. I'll be rolling through. You'll meet Porter. You meet Isaac Asiata. Riles sometimes comes through. Scott Mitchell. Sly. You never know who you're going to see. It's a good time. And the forecast on Saturday, I guess what I'll say is it could be worse, okay? Look, it's November in Salt Lake. You're not expecting for anything all that exciting, but according to what I have in front of me, the AccuWeather forecast at kick is 48 degrees and clear. For 8:15 on a Saturday night, basically in mid-November, 48 degrees and clear is not a bad gig, man. Looks like we're going to get a 60-degree day next Monday. All right, not bad. So come on by and say what's up. Obviously, dress warm, and we would love to see you. We are going to bring in Bill today. Riles will stop by, the voice of the Utes. I know he was a little bit busy this afternoon. He said if he could make it down to Beer Bar, he would. So we'll have to see if that kind of makes its way around here. But if you want to come down and say what's up here at Beer Bar and potentially meet Bill, 161 East 200 South is where we were at. All right, started things off today with Pablo Mastroeni. If you missed that conversation, RSL fans, check out the podcast page. If you want to hear about what the head coach had to say about the season that is now behind us, you can definitely check that out. Spencer Litton, BYU TV, for a little BYU Utah. Always great to catch up with Josh Pate. And so 2 college football interviews and an RSL interview so far for you guys to check out. And we'll bring in Riles coming up. We'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program live here at Beer Bar, 161 East, 200 South. Before we catch a break to make some space for Bill coming up on the other side, let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros, who has incredibly affordable solutions for things that, I'll just say it, you're paying too much money for, because I did it myself before Ryan helped me out. So cable television, wireless options, internet too. My internet just went up. Yours probably did as well. So let's bring him in. 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Yeah, it's funny. They don't like to send you any kind of notification letting you know your bill's going up. You just see your price go up on your credit card charge. Guys, here's the deal. A lot of people out there are way overpaying. We've got this very good promotion. It's still stacks where we can do the 2-year promotion, 2-year price guarantee. You get the massive credits, movie channels, multi-sports pack free for a year. You get the NFL Red Zone. And also I can get you Netflix free for 2 years. That alone is worth $370+. Most of us have Netflix, and this works for you even if you have it currently. And Netflix is built in the system, just like Amazon and YouTube, and you can add any other apps that you'd like to add to be able to have access to everything, all within the system. Makes it simple and easy to use. Plus, great internet options. Hey, listen, fiber is one of those things. Call us up. If your fiber provider raised your price, you can probably use the same fiber and pay a different provider less money. And it's the same thing in the cell phone world. Boost Mobile is building out this 5G network right now. It's going to be the most advanced 5G network in place. And as they build it out, they're actually piggybacking off of the biggest wireless provider in the nation's cell towers. So you'll probably even have an account with this company. Here's the thing, you can switch providers, use the same cell towers, and spend $20, $30 a month less. Plus, right now, at promotion where you can get a brand new iPhone 16 Pro or the new Samsung free with no trade-in and pay $30 a line less per month. Limited talk, text, data, hotspot, all that good stuff, roaming, you have all that. Call us, and these customers who do the triple play and bundle, they're saving $250, $300 a month in savings by like $6,000, $7,000 in the next couple of years. Call us 424-DISH, 801-424-3477.
Okay, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. Bill Riley, the voice of the Utes, stops by coming up next to get us ready for the big game on Saturday live at Beer Bar. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Had to do it. Had to do it on the rivalry week. Say that slowly into a mirror if you're speaking into a microphone on radio or TV this week. But the voice of the Utes, the appearance of Bill Riley on this radio show during rivalry week had to be the jam you guys listened to for 20 years prior to the start of Bill's show. Riles, I'm disappointed that here at Beer Bar there's no beers with Bill, but I'll take the time anyway. How we doing?
I'm doing good, Spence. It was good to see you this morning for a few minutes. Give Duncan and Richard and all the crew down there my best.
I will for sure. So I appreciate your time. So what's the week like for The Voice, man? I mean, we've talked about it with a bunch of guests all week long. I love it. I always have. When you and I were doing our old show back in the day, we had a producer who our producer did not want to get out of bed during rivalry week. Shep hated it. Some people hate it. I love it. What's this week like for The Voice?
Well, I love it. It's weird for the first time in, 20 or 23 years living here, not doing a radio show during rivalry week. This was always one of my favorite weeks of the year, and I've been listening to you all week long, and it's just great. And I'm, so much has changed in college football, Spence, and college athletics. The one thing that we have still are rivalries, and this week is just so good. You and I are old enough to remember. I'm old. You're getting there. We used to be able to talk about this game 365 days a year back in the old Mountain West Conference days. You could crack the mic on a Tuesday in mid-May and start to fire up some Utah BYU. That's kind of tempered a bit in recent years. Different conferences, Utah had kind of taken off, BYU had kind of leveled out. But now being back in the same conference this year and BYU having a great year and Utah dealing with some issues, there's plenty to talk about. But as that little liner coming in from our buddy Kayvon said, when these two get together, there's no home field advantage, there's no real edge. It's usually a one-possession game, and I think we'll get that on Saturday night too. So I love this week. It's everything college football and college athletics should be about.
So the question, Riles, on a Wednesday, Utah BYU rivalry game, hot or not?
I would say warm.
Okay.
Heating up.
Okay.
I think if Utah was a little bit better right now and not having lost 4 games in a row, I think this game would be hot. I think it would be white hot. So I think it's warm with the possibility of getting hot Saturday night. But it's hard to call it hot all the way around when one of the two teams is struggling pretty well to try and find out who they are. And obviously that's Utah. They're trying to figure themselves out offensively.
So you continue to preserve and protect the sanctity. I do appreciate that.
Always. You must preserve and protect the sanctity of rivalry week on a Wednesday.
No doubt, no doubt. So, Riles, the line opens with BYU getting 5 in Vegas, which essentially means Vegas is saying on a neutral field they think BYU is about a touchdown and a little bit more than that better than the Utes. It moved towards Utah twice to 3.5. It settled at 4. So if we remove the oddities of the game, which is impossible to do, and we'll get back to the actual dynamic of the game, and you just analyze these two teams as they are, is it fair to say right now Brigham Young's about a touchdown better because that's what Vegas seems to think?
I think that's a fair line, Spence, because of the way they've played this year. I still think Utah's talent is probably as good, if not maybe a little bit better, but they've not played to their talent this year. And obviously there's been a big gaping hole at quarterback again, and that's a big reason why. BYU, I think, has played above their level. I think they are a good football team that has not beaten itself and has been very opportunistic when other teams present them with turnovers and gifts. Just because you get a turnover, Utah's gotten turnovers this year and they've kicked field goals. BYU feels like they pay those things off with touchdowns, and that's what good teams do. So based on where they are right now and the way they've played, I think that line's fair.
Okay, so I want to expand out because it's been a couple of weeks. We've had some scheduling stuff because you're very busy since we've been able to catch up. And, Bill, last time we spoke, I felt like, I was the media guy that was holding on to the final branch of confidence before hitting the ground. And now my face is in the dirt. I mean, it's 4 straight L's. I didn't see this coming. I get plenty wrong. I'm not sure that I've ever been as wrong as I've been about this Utah football team. So on a scale of reductive statement, no Cam, all the way to 4-4, 4 straight losses, take us on this journey. How do we find ourselves here?
It's obviously the injury to Rising, and the eggs were in the Rising basket this year. And that didn't work. It's that obviously Cam's injury against Baylor and his inability to come back, and then the injury to the lower leg, whatever that was, against this was Arizona State now. That sidelines you. But the backup plan to have a true freshman as your guy, I think that they were betting a lot on Cam being healthy, this year. And when you turn to a true freshman, you just don't know what you're going to get. Isaac's had some good moments, and Isaac's had some freshman moments. And I think probably the disappointing part is, there's not been that, that level line to maybe that slight bit of progression. It's been that roller coaster, that up and that down, and there hasn't really been that steady incremental progress with the offense. And I think that's probably the reason you saw him go to the bench in the second half against Houston. Brandon Rose had a couple of bright moments until he threw that pick late. And so they're looking at everything right now. And they've had 2 weeks to get ready, and we'll see what they roll out on Saturday night. Kyle's called it the plan. I'm very curious to see what that plan is. Now, the one thing I will always go back to, Spence, and there have been games like this before, Brian Johnson tore his knee up pretty good, second to last game of the year, and they turned to a guy that nobody had ever heard of, came from nowhere, was not a highly recruited guy named Brett Ratliff, and got him ready in a week. Utah was about a 16-point underdog in Provo, and they went down there and won that game. I'm not saying that necessarily is going to happen, but what I'm saying is, sometimes, unusual things can happen, and with 2 weeks to get ready, maybe Mike Bajakian and his quarterbacks have found a little something. That's what we'll find out Saturday night.
So let's move over into that space now. When it pertains to the plan that you have discussed, that Coach Witt has talked about, and had your broadcast partner Scott Mitchell out on site at ARUP yesterday. And I said to you this morning when I saw you at the studio, and to what I said to Scott when he sat down, and I said, I don't know. One of my friends back east is Italian father, and I can't use the language, but he would say, I don't know nothing from nothing, right? So I don't know nothing from nothing, but when I heard Brandon Rose talk on Tuesday, I thought that sounds like a kid who's getting the start. I have no idea. But where are we at right now with his progress of getting one or the other, or maybe a bit of both, ready for this game on Saturday night?
The sense I got listening to Kyle talk was they had given both these guys a look, and we're going to give these guys an option. When they say they've got a plan, that makes me feel like they might have a plan for both quarterbacks, whether that's rotating guys or whether I don't know. I asked him last night. He was just kind of sly with me. He says, you'll see Saturday. So he didn't really give anything away to me last night either. So my inkling is both those guys have probably gotten some looks, and the plan maybe involves both guys. We'll see.
So ultimately, we all just kind of discuss the feedback we get from our inner circles. So I want to be careful with the narrative that I think is getting a little bit out of control. And you've got a pulse on Ute fans, and obviously you're up there now full time. What I can tell you is I have been contacted by some people that I haven't heard from in years that I went to school with that are really, really down on the program. And look, we probably should have recalibrated expectations, but we were all wrong, man. It's not just local. It's not just on our station. Like, they were the Vegas favorite. They were the media pick. And across the landscape, and I scoured predictions prior to the year. If Utah wasn't picked to win it, they were in everybody's top three. Ironically enough, most people, would include, Oklahoma State, who can't win a conference game, and K-State, who is good, not great. I mean, I have no idea. But like I said, I've heard from a few people who are just simply not going to the game, and they've sold their tickets. I don't want to turn this into like that stadium's going to be blue. But what sort of pulse do you have on Ute fans as far as what you're expecting with that atmosphere on Saturday night?
I've talked to some people that have considered not going. I said, are you going to sell your tickets to Ute fans? Well, I haven't decided what I'm doing yet, but I don't know if I want to go out in the cold, which, you know, I don't like to call anybody out. I always say I don't like to tell people how to fans.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But this is a rivalry game. I mean, this is Utah against BYU. And to me, not showing up to this game in your home stadium, you know, there's a sense around Utah football fans that they're 0-8. And they're 1-7. They're 4-4. And I know they've lost 4 in a row. They've not looked good. They've not met expectations. I get all of that. But if you've been alive this century, you've seen some crazy, wild, unbelievable games where Utah was wildly favored or BYU was wildly favored. And to me, you only get so many college football games, and it's a rivalry game. And again, this Utah football team's got talent on it. Again, with the gaping hole at quarterback without Rising, you're just not going to be a contender without a proven quarterback. It's just hard to do now. But this is not a bad team. And with 2 weeks to get ready, I've been a little disappointed in some of the people I've talked to about their it's okay not to be happy about where the season is, but man, this is your rivalry game. This is one you want to show up for. And these games have been fun over the years. So I hope the people that are considering not going change their minds and show up, and there's a good atmosphere. They'll always be blue. BYU fans always find a way to get into that stadium. There'll be a patch of blue. There might be a little bit more blue this year than usual, but I hope the Utah fans show out, because I really do, Spence. I do believe this is going to be a one-score game.
Yeah, and you know, it really does come down to the generational thing, and I know I used to crack on you for being old when you were like 32 or whatever when we were doing the show. But I'm now old enough to look back, and like I'm sorry to be this guy, but some of these like millennial Ute football, like go vape or whatever you're doing, you know, like they're spoiled, like the entitlement. Because I can remember, and this is a testament to Kyle, I can remember when I was in school or even prior to, it was go to a bowl game, beat BYU, miracle, right? Those were the expectations. Now, expectations have changed. But it doesn't mean you sit out potentially the final chance you'll have to maybe see some of these coaches in this game. And the final chance you'll have, Bill, quite frankly, and look, the game at Colorado is going to be awesome. It's just BYU's different. And you referenced Brett, and, you know, we were talking about Jason Shelley and the 27-20 comeback. Yeah. The list of names that we talk about, the Mike McCoys, the Eddie Johnsons, the Scott Mitchells, if these young men can for one night be great against this team, if Dorian Singer goes for 150 and 3 touchdowns or whatever, no matter what has happened or will happen the rest of the way, you will be remembered and talked about differently in this community. Like Saturday night, it to me is maybe the last and certainly the biggest chance this team has left to be great. And if they are, they will be remembered differently, even though the season's been a bit of a disappointment.
You're 100% on every single one of those points. And I would point out, too, you're right, I think there is a little bit of, hey, you know, this program's been so good for so many years in a row. Again, there's been a little bit of a dip this year. There's a lot of reasons for it, but you know, they're not a bad program. There's a lot of talent in this program, and there is an ability on a given night to rise up and do it. Every weekend in college football, every weekend it feels like in the Big 12, somebody's upsetting somebody. Texas Tech went on the road to beat Iowa State last weekend. It can happen, and I just think if you're really a fan and you really love college football, this isn't like the Jazz or the hockey club where there's 80, you know, there's 45 home games. You only have 6 home games, and you haven't played your rival since 2018 at home. Come on out and survive. I believe it with all my heart. I think it's going to be a good game because I've just seen enough of these. I've called enough of these to know that they're unpredictable.
Since you brought up the Jazz, should we dig into the possibility that Utah football is actually tanking? Nobody talks about that.
Is Cooper Flagg available to play quarterback and or tight end or receiver next year?
I don't think that's how it works in this sport. I'm just saying, you know me, man. I like to zig when other people are zagging. Let's just talk about all possibilities. Since you referenced all of the games that you have called, I will tell you my favorite Bill Riley call was the Brandon Burton block, only because I knew in your head you wanted to punch Dolce for running over the call. Do you have a favorite rivalry game moment, a snapshot of all these games that you've called?
Moments. I didn't call the game, but the famous Tostito Bowl game in 2004, when the game ended and the fans stormed the field, and it went from a green field to a field completely covered. Looking at it from up high, that was Mark Klopp's last home game, was crazy. I mean, it was just impossibly crazy. The third time is the charm game, just a couple of years after the Brandon Burton block, where Utah basically on the last play of the game had to beat BYU 3 times, and they ended up doing it there. Jason Shelley's run was amazing, too. I'll tell you the game, Spence, and it was the last time BYU won at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Now, Utah didn't win the game, but the game itself was unbelievably entertaining, was the 06 game. It was the famous Beck to Harleen game. The end of the game was not great, but it was the back and forth. It was at 33-31, I think, was the final score. It was an unbelievable game. So those are some of the memories that I absolutely positively love.
All right, let's move over here. So we had the coaches show last night, you and Coach Witt. So you've been around the team, you've been around the coaches, and all we get are snapshots of sound that we play on the show, sound we get from media availability or, videos you see on social or just on the local newscast. So I don't really have a pulse on how they're doing. If it's going to be a close game and if they're going to, be in it, they're going to have to mentally be ready because this is a good team. I guess I'll just ask you what the kids would ask. What's the vibe like up around Utah football?
The vibe yesterday was great. I was up at the facility probably an hour before the show. Everybody was kind of buzzing and on edge a little bit coming off the practice field. Got a chance to talk to the Fano brothers on the show last night. These are 2 Utah County kids. They're Spanish Fork kids who went to Temp View High School, so they were a stone's throw from Lavelle Edwards Stadium. Logan Fano began. These guys are really hyped, and I said, do you guys like your chance? And they're like, oh, yeah, we love our game plan Saturday. We love our game plan. So the sense I got yesterday, and it was Tuesday. Granted, it was Tuesday, but there was a lot of enthusiasm about it.
That's good to hear. So let's move over now to the game. And you referenced you think it's going to be a 1-score game, and ultimately the line is settled at 4, so that's not too far off exactly what we'll see. What gives you the most confidence? Because there really isn't a lot of data that would indicate Utah is a better overall team. There's some defensive metrics in conference play that do favor the Utes. What's giving you the most confidence that you think this will be a 1-score game, and what does Utah have to do to ensure that that's the deal?
Well, one, they can't turn it over. I mean, they just can't. They've thrown way too many interceptions this year, and BYU might be the most opportunistic team in the league, so they can't turn it over. But I think Utah's defense, and I think the emphasis this week is forcing some turnovers if possible. I think the Utah defense has to play its best game of the year and maybe set the offense up with a couple of short fields. I have no doubt Morgan will be dialed in with those guys. And to be fair, you ran off some of the metrics. The defense has been good this year. It really has. It's been better than good on some days. They've just had to kind of carry the load because the offense hasn't put up a lot of points. So, to me, the offense cannot turn it over. And I think the defense is going to have to come up with a couple of turnovers and maybe some short fields.
Okay, last thing, then I'll set you loose because I know you got to get to it. And the obvious answer, I suppose, maybe whoever starts under quarterback. And I won't limit you to one name. Give me a couple of names of the most likely candidates that you think will step up on Saturday night, that in 20 years we're talking about them the way we talk about Brett and Brandon and everyone else that we talk about having great games against Brigham Young. Who are the most likely candidates?
Well, I think it's whoever is the starting quarterback. And whoever plays maybe the most snaps at quarterback, if they both end up playing. Again, I don't know what that plan is. But I think it's easy to zone in on that, but it's just simply the case. You've got to do that. I think there's 2 other guys. I think Brant Keithy has got to have a big game. I think Keithy in the middle of the field, when they can get him the football, can be that guy. Kalani's defenses, J.J. Hill defenses generally don't give up a lot of big plays, Spence. They kind of keep everything in front of them. So I think you're going to hit them with a bunch of big plays when you haven't done a lot of big plays this year. Might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think Keithy having a big game, and the other guy I would keep an eye on, too, is Mekhi Bernard. And I think they would probably love to get Mekhi out in some space and get him the ball, not only running the football, but also get that ball to him out in space and let him catch some passes, too. So whoever the quarterback is, but I'll say Bernard and Keithy, too. If those guys have good games Saturday night, Utah will have a really good chance.
All right, man. Well, it's a great week. I know you're busy, so we'll let you get back to it. Thanks so much for the time, and as always, have a great call, okay?
Thanks, my man. I'll see you Saturday.
All right, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, on the program today. Our University of Utah pregame coverage for the game on Saturday begins at 4:15. So set your alarm for that. Porter Larson, Isaac Asiata, bunch of different Utes like Nate Orchard rolling through. And you can roll by our tailgate if you'd like by coming by Beer Bar today, and I'll hook you up with a couple of tailgate passes at 161 East, 200 South, right downtown here in Salt Lake City, Utah. If you've never been to our tailgate, it's a lot of fun. We have craft cocktails from Clearwater Distilling. We have free food from our friends at Wingers. And you guys can come by and say what's up. Meet Porter. I'll be rolling through. I'd love to say hello to you prior to going inside the stadium for what should be a really electric night. I still believe that that's going to be the deal. All right, let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Bros, who can help you out if you want to make a switch and save money with your cable television watching situation or your wireless situation. Or now he can help you out with internet, too. It's 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Yeah, that's the best thing is we have all these different products, and and to take advantage of the tools that we have, this is where we're really going to help people. But guys, on the TV side, this is such a great offer. Get all the games, watch everything you're looking for, including if it's on streaming or not, the dish system. We've got this awesome promotion where we can set you up credits for 2 years. The price is guaranteed not to change. This also comes with movie channels. You get the multi-sports pack free for a year, which includes the NFL Red Zone. And on icing on the cake, and you get this awesome thing, get Netflix free for 2 years. Now, as most of us have Netflix, that's like $370+ Call us up, take advantage of that, get that extra money, lower your current bill. We typically see it $60 or $70 actually to $100+ a month for most cable and DirecTV customers. Plus, on the internet side, we've got a half a dozen great internet providers. I've still got the one provider offering a $200 gift card. And your fiber bill just went up like 20%. You can literally check and see with us if you can use the same fiber but say a different provider and lower that bill. And the same thing goes with cell phone service. Boost Mobile is building out the most advanced 5G network. In fact, they have a super awesome promotion right now. And while they're building out their network, they're piggybacking on the biggest wireless provider, cell towers in the nation. Probably know who they are. It starts with the first letter of the alphabet. Guys, here's the thing. You can use the same cell towers, switch, lower your bill $20, $30 a month. You get a brand new iPhone 16 Pro free, no trade-in, or the Samsung SCS, I believe, free. This is an awesome opportunity. You get all the bells and whistles, limited data, text, hotspot, home in Mexico and Canada or anywhere in the world. Just call us 424-DISH, get upgraded, lower your bill, be part of the troop that's saving $200 or $300 a month. You just got to call 424-DISH, 424-3474.
All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The 5 o'clock hour of the drive comes your way next, right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time. Your commute home on this Wednesday afternoon starts right now. You are now officially halfway through your work week. You are one day closer to the weekend, a couple of more days until Utah BYU, which of course has been a lot of our coverage this week. Your pro football weekend actually gets rolling tomorrow. Don't forget we are your home of the NFL here in Utah in this market. So hard to believe, but Week 10 gets rolling tomorrow with the Bengals and the Ravens from M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland. It's a night off for the Utah Jazz. It's a night off for the Utah Hockey Club. It's a night off for both Utah and BYU men's basketball. So tonight, if you're looking for something to watch, looks like NBA hoops is probably the deal for you, unless you want to watch some other college basketball. We've got some pretty good games in the NBA tonight as we're inching closer and closer to a realistic sample size of when we can kind of understand what the league is about. We know what the Jazz are about, but I always say 20 to 25 games in pro basketball until we really understand the direction these teams are taking, unless your direction is obvious like the Jazz, and that ultimately means they're not going to be good most of the year. They got their first win in Chicago. They're going to be in Milwaukee coming up tomorrow, taking on the 1-6 Milwaukee Bucks, leading to a lot of speculation about what they'll do. Milwaukee meaning, do they move on from Giannis? I mean, the Giannis Dame thing hasn't worked. Still feel really bad for Adrian Griffin, who lost his job, and they brought in Doc Rivers, who's my guy, but man, it has not worked. All right, so most of the show today has been college football related, as you would expect. A really illuminating conversation with Pablo Mastroeni to start things off today, as we did a little autopsy on the RSL season that is now behind us. Then moved over to Spencer Litton from BYU TV. Just chatted with Bill O'Reilly, the voice of the Utes. And Josh Pate's going to come your way in about 20 minutes from now before we say goodnight at 6. We are out and about today at Beer Bar right downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Come on by and say hi. And if you've never been to our tailgate, our ESPN 700 VIP tailgate, prior to Utah football games, it's your chance to stop by and grab a couple of passes. So prior to Utah BYU, we'll have our tailgate going on Guardsman's Way. You can come on up and say what's up. We have free craft cocktails from Clearwater Distilling. We also have free food from Wingers on Saturday prior to the game. So even if you're not going inside the game, you can come hang out at the tailgate. It is a late kick. A lot of people probably scared away by the cold weather, but the forecast actually looks okay. It's about 48 degrees and clear at kick. I'm not going to tell you it's not going to be cold. Make sure you're dressed warm for that late kick. We'll be at the stadium until probably after midnight. There's no doubt about that. But if you want to come hang out with us, come on by Beer Bar at 161 East 200 South. Now, Drive at 5 today is brought to you by Sound Warehouse. You can rock your car, your Harley, your side-by-side at Sound Warehouse. Salt Lake, Ogden, and Orem. Visit soundwarehouse.com for inventory, lifetime installation, labor, warranty, and no credit needed financing. Only at Sound Warehouse. Stop by during the week for passes to our ESPN 700 tailgate. So we were all gathered around our TVs last night, wondering what the data would indicate, wondering where certain states would fall, wondering which side would win, wondering if people would be upset when they heard the announcement, and people were definitely upset when they heard that BYU came in at number 9 last night in the CFP. Porter, why am I not getting more love for my clever, oh my gosh, he's going to talk about the election, but I zag and talk about college football? I feel like I should be getting a little bit more love for this bit.
Well, it's a good bit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I just think that it's been done, maybe.
Oh.
Just once or twice on the Twitter sphere, on air a little bit. But I'm on board.
So it's sounding redundant is what you're saying. It's time to move on from it.
Or we can, just hit it over the head for the next 4 years.
I'll just say things are never good or bad. It's thinking that makes it so. Keep calm and carry on, all right? It's never as bad as you think it is or as good as you think it is. But when it comes to the reaction of BYU landing at 9, it's a little bit unfounded. But at the same time, what it is an indictment in the Big 12. That's undeniable. We've been talking about it today. That is the CFP committee saying, if you want to get in from the Big 12, you have to win the thing, okay? And the margin of error for BYU definitely became a little bit smaller last night. We'll talk more about this with Josh Pate. Their path, okay, so the rankings were released last night. In no way does that reflect what the seeding will be. I mean, BYU's path to Dallas is still very clean. They're the favorite by most metrics to at least show up in the Big 12 championship game. Interestingly enough, one metric I read today, and I'm not really sure what the formula is. It was just on social, and it was interesting, so I clicked on it. Their most likely matchup is BYU-Colorado in Dallas for the Big 12 championship game. A lot of eyes on that. Of course, Dion has done a really, really good job. Time to give Coach Prime a lot of credit. That's teams for real. Utah's going to see him in Boulder. But even though BYU comes in at 9, their path to the 4 seed feels pretty clean, okay? However, the fact that Boise State comes in at 12, because the deal is this, the top 5 seeds are the conference champs, and they're ranked in order, okay? I anticipate Oregon will be 1, Georgia will be 2, Miami will be 3, and it's most likely right now that BYU or the Big 12 champ, if it's not Brigham Young, will be in at 4. Therefore, receiving that first-round bye, which is big because that means you only have to win 3 instead of 4. I mean, teams that are matched up in the first round have to win 4 football games against their peers, the other best teams in college football. That's a tough ask, man. So if BYU is passed by Boise, okay, so if Boise is your 5th conference champ out of the Mountain West, and somehow, some way, they pass BYU in the rankings. So if Boise continues to stay clean, which I think they will, that's a really, really good team, and BYU gets got once or twice, or whoever is going to come out of the Big 12 gets got once or twice, as every other team has already got once, and Boise State somehow, some way rises up past the Big 12 champ, and Boise State home against Nevada, yeah, dude, they're winning the rest of their games. Home against Nevada, at San Jose State, at Wyoming, home against Oregon State. I suppose that one could be a little bit tricky to end the year, but I bet Boise's a healthy favorite, and I think they'll probably finish clean after losing to Oregon. There is a world that exists where Boise moves up past the Big 12 champ into that 4 spot, okay? But it's not all bad news. If we follow this, there's a chance that as the 5 seed instead of the 4 seed, BYU or the Big 12 champ would host a CFP game on campus, okay? So, but that really, so the pieces of real collateral damage, not made up by a fan base that seems to love talking about how much nobody respects them every single year for whatever reason, it's an indictment on the Big 12. Last night was the first time where I thought, okay, all of the conversation about the Big 12 getting one team in regardless, and I mean that. Like, this opens up a pathway for BYU to finish the season winning their Final 4 games at Utah on Saturday, home against Kansas, on the road against ASU, which has a little bit of a tricky feel to it, and then home against a much-improved Houston team, but that's a manageable schedule for Brigham Young. There's a world where they go 12-0, and they go down to Dallas, and they lose to Colorado, and they're left out. I mean, that is what last night meant. Let's make no mistake there, okay? But it doesn't change the fact that BYU still more or less controls their own destiny, and I still believe when the dust settles that Boise will not have enough on their resume to jump BYU or Colorado or whoever, Iowa State, K-State. We'll see how it plays out. I don't think Boise State has enough on their resume to jump into the 4 seed. So I still believe, even though folks are a little bit disappointed about seeing BYU land at 9, they will be the 4 seed when the dust settles. And in the first model that we've seen, and the first projected bracket that we've seen, Boise State, Ohio State, round 1, BYU plays the winner of that game, meaning most likely they're going to take on Ohio State, right, which would be totally wild. But as far as some of the metrics, you know, every year we do this where there's a new committee. This year I think there are 6 new members. It's kind of a hodgepodge of current ADs, former ADs, administrators, you know, and every year it seems like they tab one member to go speak to the media, and then the rankings are released. The person comes out, and more often than not, it's a convoluted mess of a bunch of different things that don't really ever line up. So I think BYU has a beef as far as being behind Indiana. And even though Tennessee is the 7 seed as of now, I would say they also have a legitimate beef of being behind Penn State. So, excuse me, Tennessee is the Yeah, that's right. BYU is 9, Indiana 8, Tennessee 7, Penn State 6. So ultimately, I do believe BYU's resume is better than Indiana's, and it's probably better than Penn State's. BYU has 2 top 20 wins, and by the way, SMU, first team out at number 13, okay? Second team out is Texas A&M, not germane to the conversation at this point. So the fact that BYU has one of the most impressive wins, and it really is with what SMU has gone and done, and BYU going down on the road and taking care of them. It felt big in the moment, but it turns out to be a lot bigger and better than I thought that it was. So that, to me, combined with look, say what you want about the luck factor or the fortunate circumstances against K-State, BYU blew their doors off. K-State's still a top 25 team. Like, that's not a throwaway win. So I understand some of the frustration and some of the conversation around brand bias. And guys, I'm here to tell you, I'm sorry, it is for real. And you want to know why? It's not just the committee. It's not just the CFP committee. It's powerful television executives that simply want the biggest and best brands on their television network. That's what it is. So that's why you're going to see the SEC and the Big Ten get multiple teams in. And also, for the most part, that's where the best football in America is played. As much as people around here don't like to say that out loud, it's just real. So is the CFP committee, combined with pressure from television executives, looking at a first-round matchup of Penn State, Notre Dame, and looking at a first-round matchup of Alabama, Texas, and wanting Georgia to host a playoff? There is a very likely scenario that, and look, I don't know that the Indiana brand, certainly on the basketball side it is, but not on the football side. I don't know that the Indiana brand as a football program is anything better than Brigham Young. I mean, I'm probably biased because I'm local, but it doesn't feel that way. But Penn State certainly is, in the realm of college football, true blue blood. Tennessee, because of their footprint, a more nationally recognized brand, certainly. And then there's no debate about Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and now Oregon. They played themselves in that stratosphere as the biggest, best, and most recognizable brands in all of college football. And if Brigham Young matched up to that brand, the TV data would tell us that it does. The only program out this way that actually has the ratings and eyes that some of these other blue bloods down in the SEC and the Big Ten have is Colorado. It's not BYU. And BYU's brand is good. It's not a bad brand. We're going to talk about it with Josh Pate coming up. So how much of it is brand bias? I'm sure some of that is there, because every year the messaging is convoluted. I heard the CFP rep say they use the eye test on Indiana. And yes, Indiana has smoked every team they've played, but have you watched BYU? Like that one to me was like, okay, I'm not taking anything away from Indiana. They deserve a ton of credit as one of the 4 P4 teams undefeated. And the other thing to keep in mind is this will play itself out. Indiana's last 3 games, Michigan at home coming up this weekend, and then it's Ohio State at the Horseshoe. They're probably going to get smoked in that one. Home against a horrible Purdue team, so they'll be fine with the final game of the season. But the Indiana stuff will take care of itself. If BYU continues to handle their business and they stay clean, their path is still very, very clear. But again, this is an indictment on the Big 12. There's simply no doubt about that. All right, coming up on the other side, we will catch up with Josh Pate, one of my favorites to talk college football with. And then we'll say goodnight around 6 o'clock tonight. Stay tuned for the best of All right, wrapping it up here at Beer Bar. The final home stretch of the drive is brought to you by our friends at LHM Dealers. Larry H. Miller Ford and Draper, the Ford King, Utah's #1 volume Ford dealer. They'll beat any trade in price in town by $750 anytime, any day. More info online at lhmforddraper.com. All right, quiet night locally as far as sports go. Jazz off, Utah Hockey Club off, Utah, BYU men's hoops off as well. Both had dominant opening night performances. Not going to mean much when you're playing bad teams like that. So got some good NBA games. And then, of course, the football weekend will begin tomorrow. Porter, have you ever bought anything off a website and then suddenly 2 weeks later find information that comes your way, mostly via your credit card statement, that you have joined a membership that you were not aware of?
I have done that a time or two, unfortunately. Yes.
Not going to say the name of the company out loud, but I bought a little cologne. Okay, it's a little cologne website where instead of paying ridiculous money for cologne, it's discounted. And apparently I'm a Prime member that cost me $79 a month, and the cologne that I bought wasn't even that expensive. And I just found out via my credit card bill that apparently I'm like a VIP member of this website I've been to one time in my life. It's pretty shady, if I'm not going to lie.
Well, now you're going to get new cologne like every week.
But I just got a new bottle. I don't need a new bottle. I just don't need them to charge me $79 because I've never even been to their website. So kind of frustrated.
I did it with, and this is a different story, but I had one where my gym got a hold of my credit card number, obviously the automatic monthly thing. It was one of those chain gyms, and man, they would not let it go. It took me like lawyers to get them to not continue my monthly payment and canceling my card. And then once I canceled my card, they still were claiming that I was supposed to be part of the gym membership for like some crazy long period of time. So I've been there.
It seriously is the most shady thing in the world, because I went to cancel on their website, and they would take you through all these steps, and then you click on the button to cancel, and it says, sorry, problem occurred. But there's no phone number.
There you go.
So this is just like, what is going on? You know what? I can't. I've gone all show, and I have not done the what is going on diatribe. I will not do the what is going on diatribe. We have a work dinner tonight, so the question is, who's the member of the staff that you least want to sit next to at dinner tonight?
Ooh, good question. That's a really good question. And I hope they're listening. I hope the whole staff is listening on their way in.
Yeah. The answer is easily Kurt.
It may be Kurt this week.
Oh yeah, it's Kurt. Dude.
I got beef with him if he's listening.
Yeah. I mean, it was a trick question because there's really one answer, and the answer is Kurt. I kid, because if I said anybody else's name, I feel like they would have a meltdown and be mad at me. You can't say DJ's a sweet kid; he'd be mad. You can't say Steve; he's the boss. You can't say Jackie; she's in charge of sales, so we need her. It's got to be Kurt, man. I think the answer is Kurt tonight. That's the one I'd like to avoid.
I think you've landed on it, but I'll sit next to Kurt. I'll take him for the team.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right, Porter, before we say goodnight on a chilly, cold, now dark Wednesday evening, because it gets dark at 5:30, what should our listeners know about what comes their way on a Thursday edition of the radio show?
On a Thursday edition of the program, a big hour. Greg Bowler, Jack Gordon Monson, they'll both stop by via the telephone line. We'll chat with Dave McMenamin, talking some hoops on the NBA Daily Assist. And then it is rivalry time. We're talking football, rather, with our friend Stevenson Sylvester, of course, the former Ute NFL linebacker. He's going to be up there at the NFL Players Association coat drive with me before the game on Saturday. And then, of course, we'll be on the sideline for the game on Saturday. So good to catch up with Sly and the rest of them. And then we may catch up with our guy Neil Smith, who we missed out on today.
Neil with a little sinus infection. He had to call in questionable, then was downgraded to doubtful, then ultimately out. So hopefully we can talk some Utah Hockey Club tomorrow. They are in action tomorrow night. All right, with that, we will say goodnight. Special thank you, Pablo Mastroeni, Spencer Litton, Josh Pate, Neil Smith, and Bill Riley. Man, not Neil. He's going to join us tomorrow. But that's 3 really good college football interviews and a really fun conversation with Pablo. So if you're an RSL fan, go grab that on the podcast page. And if you're looking for rivalry week content, we have that too. Website's an option. It's ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app and take us on the go. Called the ESPN 700 app. That's available in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Our podcast is available wherever you get shows. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. Download, rate, review, follow, whatever they ask you to do it for us, because if you do it, it actually helps, which is why we all ask you to do it. Special thanks to Beer Bar, Tanner, my onside tech, of course, Porter Larson, who produces this program. My name is Spence Checketts, saying goodnight. Enjoy your Wednesday evening, guys. We'll talk to you on a Thursday show. As always, you can find it right here on ESPN 700.